Right, we're all here now. Right, it's 6:30, and I'll introduce the opening statement, and I'll just, I know it seems a long time into 2021, but I wish everybody a happy new year from this point onwards. And I think we all need to carry that sentiment forward, because the news this evening is rather depressing, unfortunately, because of COVID. For the benefit of the members of the public watching or participating in this meeting, I'd like to explain who everybody is. My name is Councillor Paul Miller, and I'm the chairman of the committee. The committee meeting is being held virtually in accordance with the council's rules for virtual meetings, which reflect the published government regulations implementing the Coronavirus Act. The meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and will also be available to view after the meeting is finished. Councillors who sit on this committee and who will be making the decisions on the applications before us are identified by name on the screen. Ward councillors addressing the committee will be introduced by name. Can I ask the officers who will be advising the committee to introduce themselves and their role?
Good evening, I'm Mike Townsend and I'm the Planning and Development Manager.
Good evening, I'm Catherine Fitzherbert Green and I'm one of the Principal Planning Officers.
Good evening, I'm Anne Greaves, I'm the Legal Services Manager.
Bernadette, Democratic Services Officer.
Philip?
Thank you, Chair. It's Philip Richards, Senior Planning Officer.
Yeah, you're very soft in your volume at the moment. Bring yourself a little bit closer to the mic.
Yep. Okay. So
thank you very much.
Philip Richards,
that's perfect.
Senior Planning Officer.
Yep. Yep. Right. The Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee and is not a political meeting. The committee will be assessing the material brought before us and listening to the representations made, and will make decisions based on planning reasons. In reaching these decisions, we are guided by national and local planning policy and guidance. I understand that planning decisions can be emotive and ask that everyone remains polite and professional and patient throughout the evening in case of any slight delay in presentations. I will now remind both officers and members of the procedures that we'll be using as this meeting is virtual. Unless speaking, officers will have their videos switched off to provide clarity as to who the committee members are for those watching and participating. At this point, can I ask all officers present to switch off their video? The officers present will only switch their video link on during the item they are presenting or when they wish to be invited to speak by me as the chair. For the virtual meeting, councillors should observe the normal rules of behaviour under the Member Code of Conduct and ensure that they are not disturbed during the evening. Can members ensure that their mobile phones are now switched off or on silent? Can members of the committee turn on their video link during the meeting and keep their microphones muted unless they've been invited to speak by the chair? Members are reminded that if they switch off their video link or move away from the camera, they will be treated as leaving the meeting and will not be able to take part in any vote on the item under discussion. Members can indicate their wish to speak by raising their hand and should only speak when I, as chair, invite them to do so. When we move into debate of the application, may I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and keep any comments on each agenda item to a maximum of 4 minutes. As chair, I will confirm the name of any visiting speaker at the appropriate time in the agenda before they address the committee by audio link. Councillors should state if they have any declaration of interest or if they have predetermined an item on the agenda, that they are leaving the meeting and switch off the video link. They can then switch on their video link again and rejoin when I call the next agenda item. Where a member of the committee has had a predetermined position on an application and is registered to speak under the public speaking scheme, they will stand down from the meeting and will only be able to participate as a visiting councillor by audio link. They will then rejoin the meeting as a member of the committee once the application has been determined. At the appropriate time, I will invite speakers to contribute to the meeting by audio link in the order set out in the update paper, but I reserve the right to reorder the speaking in the event that technical difficulties occur. I will ask each speaker to confirm their name and interest in the item before commencing their contribution. I would ask that points made by visiting speakers are material planning considerations relating to facts. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and to keep points made on the application to material reasons only. Any questions from members of the committee to speakers should be related to matters of fact and not opinion. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. Voting will be taken by a roll call, and I'll confirm the recommendation is to be voted upon before the voting begins. When each member unmutes their microphone to vote, can they leave a small pause before speaking to allow their vote to be heard? Each member will then indicate whether they are for or against a recommendation or whether they wish to abstain. Hopefully, we will not have too many IT problems, but can I remind councillors that if their connection is lost, that they should immediately advise the Democratic Support Officer and use their meeting link to access the meeting again. Right, we'll start on the main agenda. Agenda item number 1 is apologies for absence and substitutions. I see that we have all the councillors on the committee present. I don't think there's any change there. And I've welcomed Councillor Harvey, who's joining us as a permanent member. Are there any declarations of interest from any of the members? There are none. There are no urgent matters. And I come on to item number 4, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of December. And I'd like to move those minutes as agreed unless any councillor has anything to point out as a matter of accuracy or inaccuracy of those minutes. There is no dissension, and I will eventually start my marathon signature signing sometime in the future. Now, agenda item number 5. You will see from the main agenda, this is an amendment to the clauses in S106. The application will be familiar to you. Hopefully you've had a look at the details of agenda item number 5, and I invite Mike Townsend to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I can refer members to agenda item 5, starting on page 39, and the short report related to this. Just to remind members, I suppose, of the history of this site, there was a resolution to grant planning permission for the development at 42 to 46 New Road, Tadley, which related to 42 retirement apartments, a retail unit and 5 flats. And members may recall that was back way back on 6th of November 2019. In that resolution, that resolution was based on an affordable housing provision as set out on page 41 of your report, which included 2 options arranged around a cascade arrangement, whereby the 5 units would be provided as intermediate units in the first instance at 60% of market value, and only if it was proven that that wasn't achievable through work with the registered provider, it would then cascade to option 2, which would have been to provide the 5 units as market discount, so 80% of market value, still within the NPPF definitions of affordable housing, to available qualifying persons with a commuted sum of £100,000. So that was in the original resolution back in November 2019. Members may then recall that the last Development Control Committee, so this is December 2020, the discussions around the completion of the 106 had continued, and the applicant was seeking a third and final part of the cascade, which would have seen entirely off-site affordable housing contribution as that final part, third and final option of a cascade arrangement. Members considered that and declined the request for an amended resolution on the December 2020 committee. Subsequent to that, and as set out in the report, the applicants confirmed they would not be willing to sign a Section 106 agreement without a third and final option of the cascade arrangement. And on that basis, the normal approach would therefore be to revert back to the original resolution. So that is the November 2019 resolution, which grants planning permission subject to 106 being signed. The impact being that if the 106 is not signed, officers are delegated to refuse on the very narrow issue of the 106 not being completed. So to bring members up to date, given that updated position post the December committee meeting, officers undertook to effectively try and see if there was an alternative option that could be brought forward. And listening to the debate both on the December meeting and from recollection on the original November 2019 meeting, I do recall members' main concern here was that there should be an on-site provision in relation to affordable housing. So the amended recommendation for your consideration or resolution for your consideration this evening is simply that the third and final part of the cascade arrangement. So if I can draw members' attention to the recommendation at paragraph 2.1 on page 41, is that should option 1 and then option 2 not be achievable, option 3 would effectively mean that the discount market units, which would be on-site still, would be made available to the market with a commuted sum of 100,000. So it's a slight variation of the option 2, whereby initially it has to be offered to qualifying purchasers, and that would be through our own nomination to our own housing team. If that is exhausted and no one can be found, it would only move up to this final option 3 at that point. The developer and the applicant has confirmed they would be satisfied with that, a unilateral undertaking, so effectively a legal agreement is in place to achieve that. And if members are satisfied with the recommendation, then this matter could proceed on that basis. So, Chair, the recommendation is as set out on paragraph 2.1.
Thank you very much, Mike. Members, are there any questions to the officers? Is there debate on this particular topic now that we've had this amended item 3? Is that Nick? Are you indicating?
I am. It seems to have got all a bit vague, doesn't it? Thank you, Chair. I am still concerned about this. Hold on, I lost you for a minute then. I am still concerned about this because basically what this option 3 does is get them out of the requirement to provide on-site affordable rented. That is my concern. Yeah, I know in November I voted for a scheme which didn't have on-site rented on it. That was on a location basis. I'm not keen on this. Whether other members feel that objection of no affordable rented provision on site or no affordable rented at all, realistically, is enough to refuse it. I'd like to hear from other people first. Thank you.
Mike, if you want to come back on that one.
Thank you, Chair. And it's just to clarify, and I fully appreciate the Councillor Robinson in his comments appreciates the point that rented wasn't in the original resolution, and I do understand the concerns. I fully appreciate that as officers and members we do seek to achieve that element of rent first, but I think that it is that point that on that first consideration of the application back in November 2019, that whole issue of the scheme, the viability, what was achievable, was the outcome, if you like, of the application actually being deferred the first time in September 2019 to look at what was achievable in terms of the on-site provision. And that option 1 and 2 was the starting point of what was achievable and was accepted by committee. So that resolution stands. So this is simply an extension. I do fully recognise Councillor Robinson's concerns about rent, but effectively the starting point is that resolution relating to options 1 and 2 already exists. So there would not be a rented provision on this based on that original resolution. So I think it would be, effectively, it wouldn't be possible to now return and refuse on the grounds of a lack of rented.
Any other questions to officers or anything now for debate? I see nobody else. I'll move the officer's recommendation from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McCormick, thank you. In that case, I will go through the roll call. For the recommendation, to be very clear, is on page 41 of the main agenda. Under recommendation, it's para 2.1. And that's what we're voting on now. Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Leeks.
Against.
Councillor Goodison.
For.
Councillor George.
Against.
Councillor Grant.
For.
Councillor Frankham.
Abstain.
Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Councillor McCormick.
For.
You go for. And Councillor Bound.
Against.
Councillor Potter.
Against.
And Councillor Tomlin.
Against.
Bernie.
Chair, can I just confirm your vote was for, please? Or were you voting? I know you moved it.
Yeah, I moved it. It would be 4.
Okay. So that was 4 for the recommendation, 7 against and 1 abstention.
1 abstention. The recommendation is lost. Officers.
Chair, and I would seek to take advice from Anne in legal on this as well. I believe in this instance there would need to be, I think, reasons put forward, because as explained in the introduction, the implication of a refusal of the resolution will effectively leave us in a situation where we will be having to refuse planning permission for the whole development, and we will be going therefore to an appeal situation whereby the matters both for and against the development in its entirety will come down to a reason for refusal, the absence of a 106, with this sole point around this third and final option of a cascade arrangement not being in place. Chair, I think we would need to understand the reasons for refusal related to that, because we would need to capture those in that reason for refusal. But I can only offer this advice, Chairman, which is on the narrowness of that issue. As explained in the paragraph 1.9 of this report, in the absence of a 5-year housing supply, etc., where there's already a resolution to grant planning permission, subject to the majority of these things being fulfilled, I think there is a high probability of losing the appeal, and certainly I would anticipate a costs decision against the council as well.
Fine. I did not have anybody proposing a refusal of it, notwithstanding the voting against. Could I ask Councillor Robinson to help us out here?
Thank you, Chair. I feel it does not give an appropriate mix, on-site mix of affordable housing. That is how you wrap that up in the correct speak. I don't know, but that is that is how I feel about it, and it would appear that 6 other people have tend to agree with me. This is not a difficult site. It's not a difficult location. I don't understand why the developer, the proposer, thinks they may have this problem in the first place. If they build the houses and the flats of a correct standard, they will not. This problem shouldn't exist. So I think it's an inappropriate mix of affordable and full market housing is the only phrase I can give you.
Mike, please.
Chair, and again, as I said, I'd seek to defer to Anne in terms of procedurally the necessity to take or seek an alternative motion. I would just reiterate what I've stated at the beginning, that the resolution already exists for this mix. So the fact that there are 5 units proposed for affordable, and 5 of those are, all 5 could be, and I stress that, could be discount market rent if option 1 of them being intermediate is not achieved. So that is the second part of the cascade. That has already been accepted by this council and this committee. So I think, as I explained earlier, whilst understanding the point that Councillor Robinson is raising, I think it would put the council in a very odd and unusual position to effectively now going back against that original resolution, which has already endorsed the 5 discount market units as provided by option 2. The only difference that this third and final cascade arrangement is making is simply to say that it could be open to the market at discount market rates. So it's still the same product, it's the same number of units, and it's still on site. It's simply that it's extending the eligibility, I suppose, to purchase those beyond qualifying purchases, if qualifying purchases have been exhausted first in a process to be gone through, and if they reach that point, having exhausted the ability for intermediate housing in the first place.
Councillor Robinson.
So effectively what that does is offer discounted houses to people who can afford a market value one. You're saying that, you know, we're going to put these up at 80% on the open market to anybody who might have any income bracket whatsoever. Here, have a house at 20% discount. That's doing nothing whatsoever for the people who are struggling to get on the housing ladder.
I do understand that point, Councillor Robinson, but again, I stress again, that only happens if qualifying persons don't, in the first instance, take up the option under option 2. So that is I suppose the issue around the cascade arrangement. That only becomes relevant if that first point around qualifying persons at option 2, if they get through option 1. So that, again, just stress there are 3 parts to this cascade. So that would only become relevant if those first 2 parts were exhausted.
Well, I don't know where we go from here. It's, you know, I've given my reasons. 6 other people have agreed with me. I have no idea where we go from there.
Right, if I may carry on. Councillor Harvey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously coming to this item as per this debate on this agenda and not historically, my question would really be, and the thought in my own mind is around options 1 and 2 being the cascade. And then, as you say, Mike, option 3 is the addition. If we were only talking about options 1 or 2, then it would be within the developer's gift to seek a variation based upon that, where they're not able to satisfy options 1 or 2. That the developer is seeking option 3 as the variation in order that they can step out of delivering affordable housing directly onto the market is the point. Now, if that is something that they wish, then I would challenge that. That's a viable, worthwhile challenge on the basis of our feeling of strength for affordable housing. If it's the case that they can deliver options 1 or 2, and they've given you that confidence, then I don't understand why they're after option 3. Why not just go with options 1 or 2? And if the developer can't deliver that, then come back for your options when you have a chance to think about what you mean by affordable housing. and have a proper discussion. But at the moment, option 3 is, as has been described by others, it's an 80% market discount house on the main market, not affordable housing as we would traditionally understand it to be.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank Councillor Harvey again. I understand the point fully. I think the issue in planning terms would be that it does still, even option 3 does still fit the NPPF definition of affordable housing, and I think that is the relevance of where we will be in an appeal situation. As I say, I fully respect this council's position in terms of what it seeks to achieve on most sites. I think it was largely accepted through the first resolution of the November 2019. There was something different about this site, about how the affordable housing was going to be provided, the viability information that was considered by the committee at the time, why it was a different approach. And as I say, I stress again, I recognise what Councillor Harvey is saying, that there could be an opportunity to come back to a variation, but effectively what the applicant is seeking now is saying, well, look, that option should actually be inbuilt within the original 106, because there are safeguards to require them to go through the option 1 first, and only if option 1 is proven not to be achievable to move to option 2. They then have to go through option 2 for a period allowing us to nominate qualifying people, and then only if that is not achievable, i.e. there is no qualifying persons or demand in that sense, would it move on to that third and final option 3, which nevertheless still sits within the NPPF definitions of affordable housing. So I think I can only give this advice, but I think in an appeal situation, it would be extremely difficult to provide a cogent reason for refusal and to uphold, Chair. I can see that, and it's possibly on a procedural point, Chair.
Thank you. Quick one, Nick, and then I'm going to defer to Anne Greaves.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, Mike, you say you're going to struggle with the reason. I fully appreciate that. But what the reason is, with this third option, there is nothing to stop a buy-to-let landlord taking advantage of a 20% discount on a flat, buying it at 20% discount and then letting it at full price. Now, I'm a Conservative councillor. I believe in a market economy, but that is absolutely outrageous to allow for a planning situation to allow that to happen, where a buy-to-let landlord can take advantage of a discount property and then let it at full price is absolutely outrageous. I'm sorry, I cannot vote for that.
Anne?
I think Mike will stop me if I'm wrong, but I think the developer wants the option 3 because there will be a trigger in the option 2, which would stop them disposing of market housing unless the affordable housing is provided. So that's probably why they don't want to come back for a variation. They seek a means to stop them ending up with a number of houses that they can't dispose of. In terms of the procedural point, I think, a decision not to agree it is is the decision that you make. You don't need an alternative recommendation. The position remains as it was, effectively.
Right. Well, Mike, there we have it.
Just to confirm the decision, and Chair, the recommendation is declined, and we will progress with the original resolution, which will ultimately result in the refusal of the Planning Commission on the sole reason related to the absence of a Section 106 agreement on the affordable housing element solely.
Thank you very much. Right, we move on to main agenda number 6, and we move on to item number 1. Now, I trust that the members got the update paper in good time this afternoon to be able to go through it, because it's rather lengthy. It will be introduced by Catherine. Now we have speakers for this, and the first one is Ms. Titcombe. If you could check in, please, and just hang tight when the officer introduces the item.
Thank you, Chairman. So item 1 this evening addresses the site of Sungrown Farm at Abbey Wells Road, East End, The proposal is for a farm diversification scheme on the site to the existing agricultural activities, which comprises the demolition of the existing agricultural workers' dwelling and its replacement with a smaller agricultural workers' property within a new position on the site, the recladding of 2 agricultural barns, and the erection of a single multi-use building to provide retail space, a bakery, cafe, restaurant, and a lecture educational space. There would also be new landscaping taking place across the site, both hard and soft, with new lighting and a new access gateway. Members' attention is drawn to the update paper. So this includes initial comments from Councillor Sanders to the application, consultation response from the Environment Agency, final comments from the Parish Council, an additional public comment expressing support for the application, amendments to the recommendation to the committee comprising an additional reason for approval, and minor corrections to conditions 1, 8, 18 and 32. There's also a corrected drawing of the elevations for the replacement dwelling. In response to the late comments received to the application, the update also contains comments in response on the case officer, picking up mainly on the matters raised by the Parish Council. The application is recommended for permission, subject to conditions as per the agenda, and the amendments are set out within the update paper. I've got nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Mr. Titcombe, Councillor Titcombe, I beg your pardon. You have 4 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, good evening. Hello, Karen Titcombe here. Right, the decision you make tonight could change forever the character of this pretty hamlet, which sits within the AONB and conservation. Is that right? This is a sensitive location, as evidenced by the huge number of conditions the office is already proposing. It's a major commercial development in a tiny rural hamlet, dressed up as good for the community. It fails many planning policies and has been rejected by the AONB and Parish Council. As indicated in our final comments to you, there appear to be serious flaws in the way this application has been assessed, with assertions being accepted without evidence. 180 people from my parish believe this is so serious they've written providing concrete evidence as to why it's wrong. Wrongfully dismissed by our own councillor, given cursory consideration by the planning team, yet they are compelling reasons for refusal. This development will change the tranquility of East End forever, so I would ask you to reflect on 5 things. 1, how can this possibly be considered just minor development? This is major in the context of a quiet, isolated hamlet. A commercial development of this size represents a huge magnitude of change, and it fails on policies EM1 and 10. 2, how can this be considered farm diversification? A cafe and gift shop selling imported goods don't do it. There's no business plan showing how income will be returned to the farm. And anyway, only a small percentage of the goods sold will come from that farm. It fails on policies EP4D and E, and as we've already indicated, it fails because of the increase in traffic it will bring, which is a subsection of policy EP4. Number 3, where are the exceptional circumstances? There are none, nor are there any demonstrated needs. We fear this will detract from the local village shops and from the parish halls. These are luxury items. Locals will still have to travel for everyday shopping, thus negating sustainability arguments. It fails policies CN8 and 9. The impact on highways. The planning officer seems to keep getting the wrong point here. We're not talking about the technical conditions of the road. We're talking about the impact and disturbance of additional vehicles. That was a good enough reason at Wasing to turn down the proposal. Think about the farm shops around Basingstoke. They're based near main roads for good reasons, not down C and U class roads. And the additional pollution from the plant will mean it fails under policies EM11, 12 and CN8. Should this application be allowed, then there are conditions of use we would want added, and this needs further discussion.
You have 1 minute.
I have made it quite clear that the Parish Council do not support. It does not align with at least 5 policies as stated above. Why have the AONB experts if their opinion is simply ignored? Why make declarations in support of the climate emergency if you don't then apply them in every decision you make? Please assess the facts. This is a major commercial development to be willfully imposed on a tiny rural hamlet, bringing demonstrable life-changing harm for East End and the parish. I would kindly ask you all to consider carefully, not be taken in by slick presentations, and to refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Members, questions for the Parish Councillor? Nothing? Thank you very much, Councillor Diston. Could I ask Mr. Crerar, Mr. Bell, and Mr. Brunson to check in, please?
Good evening, Mr. Crerar here.
Good evening, Mr. Crerar. Are you being joined by the others?
I'm not sure. We've decided amongst ourselves that I'm going to speak first for 2 minutes. Mr. Bell will then follow me for 2 minutes. Mr. Brunsden will then take any questions if you wish to refer them to him.
Hello.
That's fine. I'm going to leave you to. Yes, we can, Mr. Brunson.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, I'm going to leave it to you to do your speaking and split it to 2 minutes. I will advise you when you have 1 minute of your 4 minutes left. So, Mr. Crerar, if you're kicking off, off you go. You have 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman Committee, I'm speaking for the group, the Friends of East End, and we're opposing a major commercial development disguised as farm diversification, which is both inappropriate and unwanted. It's received 180 letters of objection, the vast majority from within the parish, a remarkable number against a single building, and it's very disappointing that Councillor Sanders has so lately dismissed the stated views of so many. Local Plan Section C9. Proposals will be permitted that do not result in inappropriate traffic generation or compromise highway safety. There's an OS map of the parish dated 1850 showing the East End tracks, and apart from them now being metalled, they're unchanged since then. The Ball Hill Road is single track for most of its length, the Wooden Hill Road very narrow, requiring frequent pulling over onto the verges, which are now badly degraded. It passes 2 other schools. Both roads have blind corners and summits and are much used by walkers, riders and cyclists. Incredibly, this is the network deemed capable of supporting several times the current level of traffic. So I ask, how soon before the first casualty? Section EM1, proposals must pay respect to the sense of tranquility or remoteness and the quiet enjoyment of the landscape. The applicant's own report records the current ambient noise as wind in the trees, bird song, occasional traffic noise, and that's it. And now there will be continuous traffic noise, a bakery from 4 a.m, commercial refrigeration 24 hours a day, deliveries, daily waste disposal. The mitigation measures will not eliminate this new background and can have no impact on the massively increased traffic noise. So the application fails CN9 and EM1 and many other sections. The location's not just East End's backyard, it's the whole of East Woody's backyard. If the application goes forward, we get a large, superfluous out-of-town commercial destination and we lose a safe, green, free public amenity. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bell, if you're going to speak.
I don't know. Is
Mr. Bell not there?
Is he not?
Mr. Bell, if you're going to speak. I'm afraid there's no audio link with Mr. Bell.
I have tried. I'm trying, but it's not. It doesn't seem to be working.
If that's Mr. Bell, you're working now.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll get started now. Sorry.
Crack on.
Sure. The case officer report, today's update and presentation shows the council's planning department is not listening to local and AONB objections. It prefers instead the vague promises made by the developers and their planning consultants. but you're the ones who make the decision. And as the case officer points out, the NPPF makes it your responsibility to decide if this is major development in the AONB. To do so, you have to take into account the nature, scale and setting of the development and any significant adverse impact it will have on the AONB. You have to follow policy, but in this case, you should also apply a dose of common sense on whether the peace, tranquility, sense of place and remoteness of this tiny, inaccessible hamlet will be significantly impacted by adding an entirely new commercial development, operating 7 days a week with 3 shops, a commercial bakery, a large bar and restaurant with large lit outside terraces, the bakery starting at 4 a.m. with delivery starting at 7 a.m. and finishing as late as 9 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. If you conclude that these new businesses will have a significant impact, then this is major development. To proceed, the applicant has to show exceptional circumstances, and they don't do so. If you decide it is not major development, then this is still an application in open countryside, outside any settlement boundary, on land not classed as previously developed. That requires the applicants to show the development proposed supports an existing commercial enterprise. To do that, you need to see a business plan. But despite a request at pre-application to do so, the applicants have never provided one. Whether they're obliged to or not, one is clearly necessary to make a determination on this application. There's no parish passing traffic out here, and East End has hardly any residents, so this has to generate new journeys to survive and be sustainable. Visitors will find the narrow roads as dangerous as Councillor Sanders describes as on page 6 of the update sheet. His support is qualified by the state of the roads. The parish council agrees, but the officer's report and the update confirm the developer will not be asked to make any contribution to improving the roads. The applicant will bring more traffic to unsafe roads, but it leaves it to Hampshire County Council or Basingstoke taxpayers to pay to fix them. We need someone to listen to this if Councillor Sanders isn't going to do it for us. That's it.
Thank you very much. You're within time and I appreciate it, gentlemen. Right, members. Any questions for the speakers from the Friends of East End? No questions? Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I ask Ms. Turvey and Ms. Is it Byrne? Excuse the pronunciation.
It is indeed.
Got something right. Right, ladies, you have between you 4 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, Chair. Sorry. Good evening, Chair and members. I speak to you this evening on behalf of the applicant, and I've also been asked to express the views of some of the local residents who support the Sungrove proposals, but don't wish to speak themselves this evening. Emily von Opel envisaged a development which would be a positive addition to the parish. Improvements to Sungrove Farm were proposed to follow on from the extensive environmental enhancements made across the road at Mulverleys. In July 2019, a consultation event was organised at Sungrove, where Emily shared her ideas with residents and asked for feedback. The event was well attended, and although some of the immediate neighbours were concerned by the prospect of development, other responses were generally positive. The decision to submit a planning application was encouraged by local support for the ideas discussed, and the scale of the proposals was reduced in response to comments made. We know that you are aware of the highly vocal opposition to the proposed development, and there's been much debate about the potential benefits and speculative impacts of the proposals on neighbouring residents. The economy of this rural area no longer relies upon agriculture, and East End has been described by some parish residents as having become a sleepy dormitory. We hope this doesn't mean that a farm development offering rural jobs, encouraging horticulture, and providing an outlet for produce should be excluded for fear of impacting residential amenity. Not everyone in East End is able to use a car, and the bus service is currently infrequent. 2 of the older residents have said they believe the facility would add hugely to their quality of life and extend their ability to continue living in East End. Another supporter points out that there is currently nowhere to walk to or to meet others, and I quote, "The benefits to both mental and physical health that the development will provide to our community must not be underestimated." Supporters have also expressed an appreciation for what the scheme would offer in terms of employment and training of a horticultural nature, uses they believe are suitable to a rural area within the AONB. They also welcome the opportunities Sungrove can provide for engagement with local schools. Before we relied on supermarkets, which stock products from all over the world, rural country villages used to have butchers, bakers and dairies. The Von Opals would like to offer their local community a fresh, healthy, sustainable taste of how things used to be. Produce grown at Sungrove last year was enjoyed by many local people. We don't doubt that people will continue to visit supermarkets or have food delivered, but we know many would welcome the availability of produce with significantly lower food miles and environmental impact. The proposed development is entirely centred around the local landscape, local produce and local people, and offers a truly unique opportunity to create rural jobs, provide amenities for local people and local schools, provide substantial biodiversity and landscaping enhancements, and improve the appearance of this part of East End's conservation area. By removing
just under a minute.
Thank you. By removing an unremarkable 1980s house and replacing it with an attractive building which far better reflects the existing character. We're pleased that members have been given the opportunity to discuss and consider the proposals objectively this evening, and we hope you will understand why we deliberately refrained from communicating with members in advance of the committee for this reason. Thank you. My colleague Katie Turvey is also on the call today, so she can assist in answering questions if members have anything they would like to ask.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have questions for the speakers? Any questions at all? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mrs. Bryan and Ms. Turvey. Question I've got, I was reading in the design and access statement that was submitted in the planning application. I was looking for something on your carbon footprint of this development, and I noticed that it says you are to look at using ground sourced heat pumps, which is a very good development there. But what I'm missing is, given the great opportunity of the roofing area that you have on your barns, even if you didn't fancy it on your houses, I'm not seeing any electrical generation. You're going to be generating, you're going to be using a lot of electricity. I'm not seeing anything on that. I wonder whether you could comment on what thoughts you have on that particular subject. That's my first question. I have one more. So.
Do you mean in terms, can you hear me first of all?
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Do you mean in terms of perhaps introducing solar panels on the roof?
Well, yes, you seem to have gone part way there, but are you have the opportunity for further, and given the borough's position on this, but I just wondered what your thoughts would be to minimise your carbon footprint, because it's.
I mean, solar panels isn't something we've considered here, given the sensitive location in the AONB location. So we've sought to look at ways of reducing which are much less visible. It's not something that's been discussed as part of the application. It's something that could potentially be considered as part of our scheme. We've still got to submit some further information on drainage and floods and what have you. But I think given the sensitive location, I'm not sure that solar panels is something that would be considered acceptable in this location.
Okay, thank you. My second question, if I may, Chair, is do you have a feel, please, of the sort of percentage of produce you will self-generate versus that you will import into the site?
The intention is that the vast majority will be from Sungrove Farm, all the produce grown on the farm. Vegetables, plants will be grown on the farm, as well as a nuttery, herb garden and an orchard. Lots of the produce will also come from Mulberry's Gardens opposite. So the intention is that the vast majority of all the produce sort of sold in the farm shop and in the restaurant will be from the site. It's difficult to give a percentage, but the vast majority, that's the intention.
But you will be taking in sort of meat products, cheese products, milk, dairy products, that type of thing. You're not a dairy farm, are you? Or
not a dairy farm. There is potential to use some of the meat from some of the grazing cattle and sheep on the land, which is sold. for meat. So there is that potential as well, and that's certainly something that will be looked at, but no, it's not a dairy farm. But the intention is that it will be as local as possible and from the site and opposite.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Councillor George.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid Councillor Tomlin asked almost precisely the question I was going to ask. It's really around what is currently being produced on the farm in terms of produce, and would that be sold, and do they anticipate increasing the range of that? But I think I've got the answer there. Thank you.
Just to say that produce is already being grown on the farm.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very similar question to the last one, but it relates to the bakery, which I heard was opening at 4 AM or starting work at 4 AM. What percentage of the bakery's product will be remaining on site to be consumed in the cafe and sold in the shop? What percentage of the bakery's product will be exported from the site on a wholesale basis? Thank you.
The bakery will be a very small craft bakery, and it is intended to predominantly serve the cafe restaurant, as well as the goods sold in the farm shop. That is its predominant intention. That because the development wants to support local businesses as well, there is the intention to sell small amounts to local businesses as well, but the predominant purpose of the bakery is to serve the other complementary uses on site.
Councillor Bound. You're muted, Mike. That's it.
Okay, I think I'm all right now, Mike. Thank you. Could you please explain to me the educational aspect of this project, please?
Yes, the whole idea is the lecture space upstairs is going to run lectures, courses in subjects such as gardening, horticulture, potentially subjects about the AONB, the landscape, all those sorts of topics to local people. The area upstairs is around about 30 square metres, so it's not a huge element. It's seen as a sort of ancillary complementary use to the other uses on the site. It's also to anticipate, and I think it's been mentioned in the committee report, that Ms Wanopa wants to get the local school children more involved in farming and horticulture and learning about those sorts of things. So it's potentially a space where some school children can come and learn about the landscape and those sorts of topics. So it's more of a sort of ancillary sort of complementary use. It won't be in use all of the time. That's the purpose of that. Lorna, I don't know if you wanted to add anything further on that.
No, probably just to say that there is already some learning on the Malverleys estate with this the very successful garden that's been established there. There are visits by people who want to learn more about how the garden has been created. So it's really to build upon that that interest and that demand. And I think there has been interest expressed locally as well. One of the points I was specifically asked to raise was by somebody who would be interested in that aspect of the proposals.
So you already have people in place who are doing something along those lines over the road at those gardens. I was just thinking about the sort of professional side of it, or is it going to be all amateur people doing it?
Well, I think the team would probably be led by Matt Rees, who has very successfully established the garden at Malverleys, which is currently open on a limited basis to visitors during the year. And you know, his you can read about his work. His his reputation is quite well established as a successful gardener. So I imagine that the team would be led by Matt.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I have no more questions for the speakers. So, ladies, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Saunders, please.
I'm unmuted, Mark. Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now, Clive. Just before you start, I just want to let the committee know, Councillor Saunders has been having trouble with his internet connection. I have a copy of his 4 minutes contribution to this application. I'll be following him through this. If at any time we lose him, I will continue speaking on his behalf, purely as to get his message across to the committee, just to make that very clear. Clive, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. Happy New Year, members, and thanks for the opportunity. I'll try and speak quickly to get through as best I can. Without doubt, this is the most contentious local application I've ever had to deal with in 15 years of being the ward councillor for East Woodley. There have been nearly 240 public observations, all of which I've read carefully, some for, some against, which is not bad for a development in a hamlet of just over 30 homes. But against this background of public interest, it's whether the application accords with the policies laid down in our local plan and the guidance of the NPPF that has to be the guiding factor of determination. So let me first deal with the new farm workers accommodation and the barns. The new accommodation is smaller than the existing building, but is better tucked away within the farm itself, replacing the existing barn. It therefore does not impact on the AONB anyway or on the East End conservation area. The recladding of the barns and the farm workers' cottage with timber cladding left to weather naturally would both enhance the appearance of the buildings and make them more in keeping with the character of the area. These proposals therefore accord with our own policy SS6 small d, even when viewed under para 11 of the NPPF about our 5-year land supply, but also meet the requirements of both policy EM1 and EM10. This then leads us on to the demolition of the old farmhouse and the erection of a mixed-use building to support the farm's diversification through the sale and promotion of its products and those of the linked Mulberry's Gardens. The first thing to say is that the current 1980s farmhouse is an eyesore. It's of no architectural merit. Its loss will not be mourned. Indeed, just getting rid of it will bring an improvement to the area. The proposed mixed-use building is bigger, but it's not significantly so, and would be in keeping with the size of its plot, with plenty of open space around it. It's set well back from the highway and from neighbouring properties, reducing its immediate impact on the street scene. The use, after long discussions of local vernacular detailing, natural materials, roof styling and rural design, would maintain the character of the rest of the hamlet and benefit both the conservation area and the AONB compared with where we are now, and whilst respecting the designated heritage assets in accordance with EM1, 10 and 11. From a landscape point of view, with the appropriate landscaping as conditions, it would fit well into the local area and alongside the farm building redevelopment. The NPPF supports the expansion of businesses in rural areas, particularly diversification of agricultural businesses and the provision of local shops. This is also in line with the AONB's core objective of bringing greater commercial activity into the countryside, generating jobs and community vitality. Commercial activity should not be confused with urbanisation. We're not talking about a Tesco superstore here. The proposal therefore meets the NPPF requirements and the objectives of our local plan, policy EP4, promoting the growth of sustainable local farm businesses. What we cannot avoid is that more activity will be attracted to the area and with it associated noise and intrusion through light and vehicle movements. But to put this into context, this is only a relatively small facility with a limited visitor capacity. Hampshire County Council are clear that the road network can handle the traffic flow likely to be generated by this development and that it accords with our policies CN9, EM10 and EP4. On the advice of officers, I am satisfied that the mitigation considerations built into the layout and design of the building and the conditions and constraints it is proposed to apply would afford a sufficient degree of protection to the tranquility of the area and its rural settings to meet the requirements of EM10 and EM12. So, set against the policy parameters relevant to this case, the application appears to meet all the appropriate policy requirements necessary for approval. On that assessment, I am obliged to support the officer recommendation. And whilst I appreciate local residents quite naturally wish to limit the change to their much cherished environment, I do not believe actually that the impact they foresee will necessarily be as great as they anticipate. And if it's approved, I hope that the benefits will be something that in time they may come to appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Questions to the ward councillor members? Nope. Thanks very much, Clive. Right, members, questions to officers. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. To the questions I have associated to the conditions. Firstly, the lighting and the noise. Is it possible in our conditions to actually add a statement that it says it must comply with, but it should be tested after 3 months of occupation, that the lighting levels are acceptable and not causing reduction of the dark sky, and the noise is actually better or achieving that it was, rather than saying it must comply? Can we not add something to have it measured or demonstrated? And then the last question, I'm just reading the amendment paper where the condition 32 about deliveries. Why are we suggesting deliveries can take place so late on a Friday and Saturday? Seems rather peculiar to me. I know that's the operational hours of the building, but actually deliveries so late. So could we have some explanation on that one, please? Thank you.
Okay, so firstly, looking at the conditions relating to light and noise. So the wording of the condition, I mean, it relates back to the commentary within the report, where, for example, touching on matters of light on page 89, which is where the commentary starts, it points out how the existing site is currently well illuminated by a number of light sources, and actually is looking to improve upon that situation by providing lower level lighting and perimeter lighting and lighting within the foliage. It's all low level amenity. So it's actually hoping to, or intending to, be commensurate with the dark skies that we are looking to achieve in the AONB. So all those lighting requirements are actually set out in the lighting impact assessment, which is being secured by the conditions. So we would be expecting that they would accord with the requirements that have been deemed acceptable in this location. Unless Mike wants to consider otherwise, I think actually what we've got in the conditions that we have before you are actually reasonably secure, and they are actually enforceable, because we've actually got something we can go back on and make sure they are adhering to what actually they have said that they are going to do, which has been considered acceptable by the relevant officers. So, for example, with regards to light, you're looking at biodiversity in the landscape. Then moving on to things like the noise, again, we are looking to secure particular noise measures within not just condition 18 that relates to noise, but you've also got other matters such as condition 20, which are all seeking to record particular noise levels. Now, those have been, again, deemed by environmental health. So would you be able to demonstrate that actually what they are, if any noise was occurring, it is actually unacceptable noise, when actually what has been considered within the context of the application has in fact been deemed acceptable at this stage. So I don't think it would be necessary or reasonable to amend the conditions that we have at the moment. Then again, you've referred on to deliveries on a Friday and Saturday night. That figure, as I understand, or sorry, that timing, as I understand, has been borne out from the information provided within the application. But again, if members felt that there was need and it was necessary and reasonable to do so, then we could probably look at amending those hours.
Okay, thank you. Just going back to the noise, and that is what we're saying then is, if a judgment is made by somebody, or who might that be, then it would be and felt that there was a problem, it would be a matter for enforcement, as opposed to us being satisfied that they did achieve what they said they set out to do. It would be a judgment call, then enforcement. But what I'm looking for is something that says, yes, you tick the box, it's achieved, that's the end of the story. I'm just thinking it's too open-ended because it becomes subjective, and somebody has to take the mantle up and chase an enforcement. So that's all I'm requesting.
If I would just refer you, for example, with regards to noise, to condition 20, that's on page 100, and that actually sets out particular noise levels. So it does actually give a measurable sort of quantum which can be enforced against should there be considered to be an adverse impact arising, which is over and above what has been considered acceptable at the application stage. So we do have the opportunity to enforce against unacceptable noise if it is contrary to those particular conditions.
Yeah. But my point is, who calls that it is out of order? If we can't see that it's achieved it, it's up to some. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yep. Mike, you want to come in here?
If possible, Chairman, and just to, I suppose, confirm Catherine's point, again, recognising what Councillor Tomlin is saying regarding, I suppose, ultimately compliance, but I think it comes down to condition 18, where it picks up on air quality, lighting and noise. This isn't a situation where we're seeking additional approvals. This is a situation where we've got the information already and the condition is seeking compliance. So ultimately it would be a compliance issue, as you say. There isn't a sort of a verification route that those have been installed, but if they are causing harm, i.e. if there is that reporting of something going beyond what is envisaged, I guess, then that is something that we would pursue because we have the details within the current application as is.
Okay. Right, long as we're happy with that. Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check with Catherine? I mean, firstly, could I say very comprehensive report, well written, and thank you for that. And I'm sure Councillor Sanders has been content really with the detail that he's been provided with, hence his statement here this evening. I just wanted to, and if I've missed this, forgive me, sorry, on the bakery, which was referred to in the sort of 4 o'clock in the morning start of work, which sounds fairly formidable, but it depends on scale, doesn't it? And it depends on the type of noise activity that might be generated from that. What restrictions would be applied regarding activity around that particular facet of this operation, really, in regard to the bakery operation? If you get my point, really, how many people, do we know how many people would be involved in that, what the sort of traffic movement would be, and what noise level is generated by a small scale bakery? Because I'm no expert on that. Do we have any information on that?
I'm afraid I have no further information to hand, but I would refer you, for example, to the floor plan of the multi-use building or mixed-use building on page 110 of your agenda, and where you can actually see within the floor plan, which is to the sort of southern end of the building marked bakery, it is actually only a very small element of the overall building. So I wouldn't be expecting it to generate significant numbers of employment or vehicle movements associated with a very small bakery within the overall site. In terms of other matters regarding, for example, noise and equipment, there's reference to the bakery on page 89 of your agenda. And for example, it's indicated that the oven, for example, doesn't require mechanical extracts or any items to be externally mounted. So any equipment or noise would all be contained within the building. For example, if there was other equipment that would generate noise or potential for disturbance externally, then of course we have conditions, I'm sure we have conditions, yes, condition 19 on page 100 of your agenda, which would require those details to be pre-approved by the local planning authority. So that should address the issues or any concerns about the impacts of the bakery on the site.
Sorry, Chair, just to confirm the point, and obviously in terms of condition 32, where we're talking about deliveries not being taking place before 7 o'clock in the morning, albeit we're talking about the bakery operating from an earlier hour. I mean, the presumption would be there that the materials would have been available and delivered some time the day before. By definition, we wouldn't be talking about that activity on the morning, well, on that early morning time of 4 o'clock or just beyond. I guess that's a reasonable presumption, is it?
I would say it is a reasonable presumption, yes, that condition is there for a reason. And then also we also have the condition 33, which also seeks to secure a further delivery and service management plan. So again, we can also control this matter in perpetuity.
Thank you.
Right, I've got a question for the officers. I read with interest the full response of the AOMB submission that was one of the documents on the BDBC website. A very short summation of that was included in the report. It was very obvious that the AOMB, as well as this site being within the local conservation area, are adamantly against this development, against this application and what it results in. Could I ask the officers how much weight that we apply to that objection, being the fact that they are formal consultees, and the weight of that application, it goes along, it agrees with the MPPF para 11. It's paragraph 11. It's actually included as a specific within that paragraph, which is what we consider a lot of our applications under at the moment.
Okay, so yes, the AOMB consultation response is summarised within the overall report, but of course you have read the full response, and of course it's available publicly for anybody else to read. So in looking at the AOMB, I mean, and the location also in the conservation area, it is a significant matter which has been given weight within the consideration of the application. And again, reference is made to the MPPF, where this states that great weight should be given to conserving and enhancing the landscapes, such as the AOMB, which have the highest status of protection. So of course, this does attract great weight. We also have to balance that alongside all the other considerations that we have to look at within the consideration of this application. And that also goes beyond just looking at those landscape matters, but also all the other matters that members are very familiar with when you are looking at all the economic, social and environmental objectives of sustainable development as a whole, which is what we are seeking to achieve. And that sits sort of aligned with, again, some of the AOMB objectives, or the purpose for the AOMB, which I think was touched on earlier, where this is looking not just at the landscape and tranquility, but also looking at maintaining and sustaining communities. So it has a broader approach. We're looking at the village as a whole, looking at the landscape, we're looking at what is happening, and looking at that local community and what you're bringing to that community and supporting that community. So actually those sort of matters and those concerns also tie in with other policies of the local plan. I mean, overall, yes, it has been given great weight. It has to also be considered alongside other policies. And you also touched on paragraph 11 of the MPPF just a moment ago. And if I just turn to that, if you just bear with me one moment. So for paragraph 11 of the MPPF, I mean, at the outset, it states that plans and decisions should apply a presumption in favour of sustainable development. And that's where a proposal that accords with an up-to-date development plan, and it says without delay. Now, the assessment of the officer, when they were looking at the application, they have concluded that the proposal does accord with an up-to-date development plan. It accords with our policies, which are looking at the aspects of, say, EEP4, for our rural economy. We have picked up on matters of the replacement dwelling, the refurbishment of the barns, looking at character and appearance of the area, biodiversity, landscape. So there's a lot of wide-ranging matters that have been considered against the policies of your development plan. So yes, the protection to the AOMB is within there, but the policies that have been considered, where this proposal is considered to accord with those policies, have deemed that the scheme is acceptable.
Thank you very much. Now I've got one. I can clarify. Okay. The other thing that comes back to the sustainable development, it's mentioned in the report, and it was mentioned by Councillor Saunders in his other submission into the report about the road accesses to East End. It's in his ward, he knows them very well. The fact that they're two-way traffic immediately outside the site, and that seems to have been emphasized quite a lot. But as soon as you leave the site to access the various other villages and then out towards the greater highway network, they're basically single track roads. The roads have never been widened. As he said, there are wagon tracks that have just been metallized, and that the for 2 cars to pass, you are leaving the metallized surface, and it doesn't matter which way you come into East End, the verges have been completely destroyed. Now, sustainability, if you're asking for increased traffic to come to this development, because it can't be there to service 30 or maybe 40 houses, which is a hamlet, there's bound to be an increase in traffic, including the deliveries that are going on that were alluded to by one of the other members. Can we honestly say that it's sustainable when it's by the admission of both the local community and the ward member, the roads are inadequate to support this particular development and the increased traffic it's going to generate?
So touching on the highway matters, of course, members will be aware that the application has been subject to consultation with the Highways Authority, which will be Hampshire County Council, who would be familiar with the area. They have come back with no objection in their assessment of the application, of the information that has been submitted, and that includes the character and appearance of the road network and the volume of traffic that would be likely to be generated by this particular development. Then you are also touching on sustainability, commenting on about the remote location. And actually within the MPPF, there is acknowledgement that you do not always get rural development that is wholly sustainable in transportation terms, for example, wholly having access to public transport. It accepts that the whole purpose of generating and sustaining and supporting the rural economy, it will inevitably attract vehicular movements. But again, we're looking at the character of the area, and in this case, the Highways Authority has deemed it to be acceptable for this particular development.
Fine, thank you very much. No more questions to officers. Debate. Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Chair. I was somewhat taken aback by some of the comments earlier on from some of the objectors. For instance, sort of suggesting that the case officer hadn't really looked at the application properly. And to my way of thinking, the officer report goes into sufficient detail, but does it extremely efficiently and reaches a conclusion, whether you agree with it or not. Now, I happen to agree with the conclusion that the case officer has reached. I don't consider it to be, from what I can read and what I can see, for it to be a major development. It seems to be a development that fits the site quite well. It involves refurbishment of barns, the taking down of a farmhouse, which has got no architectural merit as far as I could see from the pictures, and building of another farm building, which is well screened to the back of the house amongst some trees. And then we've got this, the building of this multi-purpose building. Everything seems to be there on a fairly small scale. The bakery, for instance, which has been mentioned earlier, is a small artisan bakery. It doesn't seem to be very large. It seems though it's going to service the what goes on in the multi-purpose building, including the cafe, as much as anything. But there will be a shop, and I'm sure local people will be able to make very good use of it, as they will be able to make use of the cafe. There doesn't seem to be very much else within this area that is very attractive to anybody else, except for the people who live there, who like their tranquility. I can appreciate that. But to me, that's a way for a place to die. I mean, who wants to live in a place where there's nothing other than pretty buildings? The world moves on. So I am in agreement with the conclusions of the case officer on page 93 and from what the ward councillor says in this instance. I'm slightly concerned, perhaps, if anything, about what I would call, there's not really that much detail about how they're going to make this successful, which does concern me a bit. When I asked the question about the educational side of it, oh, well, we've got a room upstairs, but it's not very big. And we might be doing this and we might be doing that. There doesn't seem that much professionalism behind what's being suggested. But it might be okay in terms of the bakery and the cafe and so on, and what we'd have to see. But if it's a commercial venture, if it succeeds, it succeeds. If it doesn't succeed, it doesn't succeed. So I'll wait and see what everybody else has to say in terms of the application, but I am happy with the case officer's report and conclusion. Thank you.
Fine. If I could probably help you out with one thing you didn't know, it is in one of the reports or one of the submissions. There's a full-blown garden centre within 2 miles. So it's not as if this is filling a gap. Anyway, that's a fact. It's just thought I'd let you know. Anyone else for the debate? Councillor Potter.
Endorsing Councillor Bound, I think, really, Chair and Committee. This is a particularly difficult time for anybody, I think, to be absolutely optimistic about the future and come out with business plans which are somewhat settled really in this time of pandemic, which, as you said at the beginning of the meeting, doesn't seem to be improving at the moment. But nonetheless, I think the thesis of this proposal is good. I was particularly attracted, it's not like me to say, it's about Councillor Sanders, by his analysis of all that he had in front of him, and his summary that he spoke to tonight, I think actually completes the picture in regard to all of the things that we should consider. I mean, I don't dismiss the OMB commentary, of course I don't really. Having said that, it's pretty rare for us to get the OMB supporting anything of this nature really. And so this doesn't surprise me, but notwithstanding that, as Catherine said, if you take the proposition, the proposal in the round, there are lots of things which are compliant with our own planning policies and the NPPF, which I think well justify the recommendation that the officers have made. And as I said previously, I think it's a well constructed, detailed report covering all aspects. I understand, genuinely, I understand, although I'm not privileged enough to live in such a hamlet, the concerns of the local people, but I don't think this is going to have the disturbing effect that some people have suggested in a number of places that I've read. And I think this will be a benefit to the community in many ways, quite frankly, for lots of the reasons that Councillor Sanders has outlined. So I'm very happy. I can't remember whether Councillor Bound did it, but if he didn't, I'm happy to propose the scheme as recommended by the officers, Chair.
Okay, and any other debate, please? I've got a proposer, but this is Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I can see where we're heading here. I just wanted to bring up conditions. If we are thinking of taking this one forward, that we give consideration to potentially the deliveries on Fridays and Saturdays to be the same as Monday to Thursday. In other words, till 7 o'clock. Is that something we might consider, or I'd like to just put that forward? And the other thing, I'm sorry, it's a sort of question, maybe we can cover it in debate. This is a multi-use building, it's a business. So I would understand, should anybody, God forbid, the business failed and wants to turn it into a domestic dwelling, it would have to be a change of use. I'm sorry to throw that question in, but I'd like to understand that. If it can the officer?
Well, let's clear this up, Catherine.
I can clear this up quite quickly. There is a condition within the recommendation in page 101 of your agenda, which actually removes all permitted development rights or any conversion of the property. So that covers not just the mixed-use building, but also the barns to any alternative use. So that condition is actually already there before.
Oh, that encompasses it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, Councillor George.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to back Councillor Tomlin's concerns regarding delivery, and I would support any reduction in those times entirely. I also, in summing this up, I think there's clearly Councillor Bound and Councillor Potter have already done a really good job on that. But I think this isn't physically, this is not a major development at all. It's quite modest, actually. It's replacements and recladding and all sorts of bits and bobs. So I don't consider it to be physically. I think the key issue is are the impacts major? And I know this is a sleepy place, and people would like to keep it that way, and I do have some sympathy with the community on that. But I do believe that it is very, very small scale, and I do believe that, frankly, the impacts will in the end turn out to be fairly modest on this. So I really feel that we do need to support the local communities. We need to support basically employment in the rural areas, and I think this is a very, very good example of that. And I think if the AONB has any function, it's got to embrace the fact that it is going to be part of the rural economy. Tourism isn't much in this area, but if you look at other such similar places around the UK, they do have quite a significant number of tourist facilities for people to come in and see the place and everything else, and that also fits in very much with the climate change agenda. We really do need to generate much more of a local tourism to prevent people getting on airplanes and things like that. So I do believe it fits in very well with the climate change agenda as well. So those are just some modest additional points.
Mike.
Thank you, Jez. Just briefly, just a quick reminder regarding the motion put forward by Councillor Potter. I know Councillor Tomlin suggested in terms of the amendment to condition 32, I think if I've understood that correctly, to bring it so that the Friday and Saturday deliveries would be the same as the restrictions Monday to Thursday. It wouldn't be after 7 o'clock either, 7 o'clock in the evening. And Chair, then I think that procedurally that would need to go back to Councillor Potter, so whether he's satisfied with that is part of an amended motion.
Yes, indeed. Councillor Potter, are you content with that? Because that's what the vote will be on that amended condition.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that, Chair. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Bound.
I will second the motion, Chair.
Thank you. It's been proposed and seconded with the amended condition on the delivery times for the bakery for approval, and I will run through the roll call. Councillor Robinson.
For.
Councillor Leeks.
For.
Councillor Goodison.
For.
Councillor George.
For.
Councillor Grant.
For.
Councillor Frankham.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
For.
Councillor Bound. Seconded. For. Councillor Potter.
For.
Moved it. Tomlin.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlin. Bernie.
11 for the recommendation.
Right, officers.
Thank you, Chairman. I will just confirm that this application is approved subject to the conditions as per the agenda and the update paper, together with the amendment to condition 32 with regards to the hours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move on to item number 2. This is land adjacent Elangeni. We've had a discussion on the pronunciation, and in support, Mr. Cottrell, if you'd like to check in and hang tight while Philip Richards introduces the application.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 2, which can be found on page 114 of tonight's agenda, is a full planning application for the erection of 1 3-bedroom dwelling, detached garage and new access, as well as the extension of the garden to the existing dwelling at land adjacent Elgeni, Broadhurst Road in Broadhurst. If I could draw the members' attention to the update paper, it's just to confirm that the planning agent has agreed to the pre-commencement conditions as outlined within the officer report, and the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions listed in the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Cottrell, you have 4 minutes.
Yeah. Good evening, Chair. Happy New Year to you all.
Happy New Year.
As you've just heard, this application has been recommended for approval. The officer in this instance has written a very clear and precise report that has covered all the main areas and concluded this application is not isolated, does not cause any harm to the landscape, the biodiversity or the trees, and will not have an impact on highway safety. Hopefully, some of you will have been able to take a trip out to site and you will have seen the dwelling next door, which is nearing completion. This, I'm hoping, as it is one of mine, is a good example of how this type of dwelling can be designed to look good and settle into these countryside areas. The proposed dwelling has been designed as a lifetime accessible and adaptable dwelling, meaning there is a bedroom and washing facilities on the ground floor, allowing the occupants to live on the ground floor should their needs change in the future. Finally, as I'm not going to take too long here, I'd just like to ask you to just cast your minds back to last month's meeting, where one of my schemes that was just back along Borghurst Road, back towards Borghurst, you guys as members supported and approved that scheme in that location, and this is very, very similar. So therefore, I would just like to ask you to approve this application in line with the officer's recommendation. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cottrell, for being so concise. Members, any questions for the applicant? Nope. Thanks a lot, Mr. Cottrell.
Thank you.
Members, questions to officers? No questions. Debate. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. It's a 1.5-storey building. I think it fits in very nicely with the street seam. I don't think it does any harm whatsoever. I move the recommendation. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Harvey.
I wanted to add anything. The comments have already been made, but I second the motion.
Thank you. Any more comments before we move on to the vote? Councillor Leeks.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say one of the comments was from Borghurst Parish Council. Approval of the application could result in the potential loss of the strategic gap between Borghurst and Tadley. Well, it is quite a way away, the gap. It's actually quite a way away. And I have no problems with it. And it does back onto my ward at that point. And I'm happy to second it if you haven't already got a seconder.
I've got a seconder, thank you, David, and I'm about to move it to the vote, but that's a good point. I noticed that comment about the strategic gap in the report. It's but looking at it, I had a quick Google look at it, and I think there's much the same as we addressed it in the last meeting. There was sufficient space, we weren't going to compromise the gap. I think we've got to be very conscious of these strategic gaps, because we've got to watch encroachment when it gets a bit closer, because it's tried to be done in other places. Right, it's been formally moved and seconded for approval. I'll go to the vote now and start with Councillor Robinson.
For.
Councillor Leeks.
For.
Goodison.
For.
Councillor George.
For.
Councillor Grant.
For.
Councillor Frankham.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
For.
Councillor Bound.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
And Councillor Tomlin.
For.
Thank you, Bernie.
(11) for the recommendation.
Thank you very much. That's carried. Officers.
Thank you, Chair. The application is approved, subject to the conditions listed at the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to item number 3. It's Mr. Cottrell again. If you'd like to hang tight.
Thank you, Chairman. If I just introduce this item. So this application is for land at Aldermaston Road, Hamber End, Hampshire, where planning permission is sought for the erection of a 2-storey, 5-bedroom dwelling with a detached garage. I would just draw members' attention to the update paper, which confirms that no objection has been received with regards to the imposition of pre-commencement planning conditions by way of an update to page 155 of your agenda. The application is recommended for permission, subject to conditions, as I say, as per the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Mr. Cottrell, you've got 4 minutes again.
Yeah, good evening again, and thanks for the previous item there. Yeah, this application, as you just heard again, is recommended for approval. Again, the officers have done a very good job in terms of covering all the main points. We worked with the officer along the way on this particular application and made various changes, which the officer requested. This particular dwelling has been designed to appear as more of a traditional farmhouse from the street scene, which I believe fits in very well with the range and varied style of dwellings that you find along this stretch of Aldermaston Road. As you just heard again, all of the consultations have all come back as acceptable. Again, in terms of flood and all the bits that were there, trees, biodiversity. So again, I just would like to ask you to approve this in line with the officer's recommendation. And that's me again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cottrell. Members, questions for the applicant? Councillor Bound.
Just one, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Cottrell. On page 149, there's a paragraph that deals with the ensuite bathrooms, and it says, therefore, would likely be fitted with obscure glazing. Is that likely?
It's highly likely. It definitely will be, because obviously bathrooms you put in frosted glazing. So
that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got a question for officers about that one a bit later. Any more questions for the applicant? No, thanks a lot, Mr. Cottrell.
Thank you.
Right, questions to officers, and I'll kick off on the point that Councillor Bound made, Catherine. When it comes to this business of obscure glass, yes, we can all accept that it would appear to be fairly standard that bathrooms have obscure glass, translucent panels. But if it's not explicit in conditions, is it fair to just expect it? Because if it's not in the conditions and somebody doesn't do it, there's no backup to impose it.
That is correct. It isn't a statutory requirement in planning terms to have obscure glazing in bathrooms and en suites. The condition, when we do condition it, tends to be imposed due to privacy reasons when you're considering the amenities of neighbouring properties.
Yes.
Also the privacy of the occupants using the bathrooms. But in this instance, if I draw members' attention to page 163 of your agenda, where that will show the proposed site plan, and that in conjunction with 162, you can actually see the distance of this property in relation to its neighbours. So hence why in this particular instance, it hasn't been conditioned, because of course it's considered that there isn't any adverse harm to the occupiers or to the neighbouring properties from any side facing windows in this instance, as I say, due to the distance between the properties. I hope that addresses your concern.
Yes, and I think that's a good general one for the committee in future, because that can apply to other ones. Any more questions for officers? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to clarify, it says shared access or shared egress onto the A340. I'm just looking at the plans we've got. I assume the red line, that as far as I can make out here, owns the actual access onto the road, and it's the existing house that will share with this one. Could you just clarify which way round it is, or that it is? I know it's acceptable to highways, but it's just not clear to what I have in front of me.
So I am referring to, again, to page 162 and 163 of the agenda. Yeah. My understanding is that in terms of this being shared, is that the access is for the neighbouring property of Pear Tree Cottage and its annex, and this application sit side by side. And that was borne out by the photos within the visualiser that you have been provided with. So therefore it's understood that this is actually utilising the existing field access. So you could consider that either the term shared is shared with the neighbouring property of Pear Tree Cottage, or is actually a shared access to allow access to the field which would remain.
Right, so on page 163 then, the Pear Tree Cottage, there's sort of a vague line there that they're actually going to come on to the driveway coming out of this house then. Is that how I see it?
Sorry, Catherine, can I just mention something? If you've got the visualizer, it's page 51 of 125 on the visualizer, and it shows everything you need to know, Chris, of the two accesses right on the B340.
Okay.
Mike?
Yeah, all right.
Chair, for clarity, you are sort of permitted within questions if it's helpful to bring the visualizer back up, if that would be helpful just for the public view of the
yes, to make it crystal clear. I've got no problem with that. The trouble is I can only see, I start after going to yeah, I've now lost the committee. There's a problem.
And I think is there a particular photograph you're referring to, Chair?
Yes, page 51 of the visualizer. That one.
Okay. All right. I'm happy. It just doesn't. It looks like some work's got to be done to Pear Tree Cottage to make it work. But if it's all been passed, I've got no objection. But it just doesn't look totally clear. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Any more questions to ask us? Debate. Councillor Bound.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sort of in agreement with the officer report, except insofar as on page 146, where on the 1, 2, 3, third paragraph down, Pembrokeshire has very limited services, and access to these will be heavily reliant on the use of a car. It's on the A340, and there's a very, very good bus service going from Tadley to Basingstoke, which David Leeks knows very well. It's about 4 or 5 an hour. And the bus stop is just outside the entrance, I believe, for this particular development. And there's one on the other side to go into Tadley. There is a primary school within less than a mile. There is the Queen's College Arms just down the road, and there is a garden centre next door. So whilst there are really just houses there, I think that there are quite a lot of services extremely handy for this particular development. And I would have no problem in recommending it for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Bound. I'll take that as a proposal. Councillor Leeks.
Yes, as my name was mentioned, there was until we had this epidemic, at least 5 an hour during the day, and certainly a good service on a Sunday, not a bad service on a Saturday, and quite a good late service. And I agree, there is a pub down the road. There's a garden centre which I think sells a little bit of food. I'm not sure about that, actually, but yes, it's certainly very, very, very much on the edge of an unurban area. But yeah, I'll second that. I think it's a good idea. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more comments before we move to the vote? Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support this. I am slightly concerned about this obscured glass issue because I appreciate how far the bathroom window is from another dwelling at the moment, but I think looking at the plans, it won't be long before we see another dwelling put in between this and Pear Tree Cottage. So I would, if the proposer's willing to, like to see a condition that it does have obscure glass. I'm sure it's going to be fitted anyway, so putting a condition in, I think it would just be belt and braces. Thank you.
More than happy, Chair.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any more? Right, it's been moved and seconded with the caveat of the obscure glass to be put in as a condition. If the committee is content with that, that is the proposal. So I will run through the roll call of Councillor Robinson.
4.
Councillor Leeks.
4.
Goodison.
4.
George.
4.
Grant.
4.
Councillor Frankham.
4.
And Councillor Harvey.
4.
Councillor McCormack.
4.
Councillor Bound, yes.
4.
Councillor Potter.
4.
Councillor Tomlin.
4.
Bernie.
11 for the recommendation.
Thank you. Officers.
Thank you, Chairman. This application has been approved, subject to the conditions set out within the agenda, with the addition of a further condition securing obscure glazing to the bathroom side window. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, move on to item number 4. And I'm advised there are no speakers to this application, but if it could be introduced.
Thank you, Chairman. Item number 4, which can be found on page 166 of tonight's agenda, is an application for permission in principle for residential development of a minimum of 1 dwelling and a maximum of 2 dwellings. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed at the end of the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Something that I noted at the pre-brief committee is that you'll find references to three houses on this site in some of the text within the report. That was because it was there was an amendment that came in later on. It was originally for 3 and then it was reduced to 2. I'm just trying to find the page, but we discussed it with officers before in the pre-meet. So it is for a maximum of 2. Questions to officers? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Just concerns page 168, the trees. We've got no response. Looking at the photos on and that, there are an awful lot of trees on this site. So, well, that's my question, really. If some of those are valuable, I could not make a decision if we're going to say, yeah, you can do it, because all the trees are coming down. And I'm not sure how a PIP goes there, because I know we talk about access, but we have discussed trees on it before. So there seems to be a lack of information. Can the officers help, please?
Thank you, Councillor. So the trees are addressed on page 175 of the officers of the agenda and covered in the officers' report. As it states there, because of a detailed site access layout isn't in place and before us, the factors with regards to trees and their removal isn't able to be sort of detailed, and so it's considered that's a matter for the technical detailed consent. The officer considers that in principle there isn't a concern with regards to the trees. They're not subject to any tree preservation orders and they're not protected by a conservation area and could be removed in any case. But it is considered to be a matter for the technical detail stage. As part of the indicative layout as well, it does indicate that some trees would be retained along the frontage, but yes, that is only indicative, but it's for a matter for technical details.
Okay, thank you. I have to say I missed that comment on 175, so yeah, I stand corrected that sadly there's no protection on them. Thank you.
Councillor Potter. You're muted, David.
Just to say once again, Chair, I mean, have we come to some conclusion where these PIPs are morphing into outline applications? I mean, I've said this ad nauseum, and I know you're all bored to tears, but you know, we end up, don't we, with all of these detailed considerations being before us tonight. It just seems to me those that object to the PIP should just be told just hold your fire. If this goes any further, there will be a time when you'll be able to raise all the matters that you want to raise about the suitability of the site, etc. But I don't know, you know, it's neither fish nor fowl, is it really? And it's not my understanding of the limitation of PIPs and what their intention was originally, and really what should be before us tonight, i.e. is this site big enough to sustain 2 dwellings? And to be frank, I mean, that's about the limit of it, isn't it?
I'll answer that. The answer is yes, and I have discussed it with Mike. We have, I've made a couple of suggestions because my suggestions, and I'll be quite frank and open with the whole committee, I've suggested that we do exactly that, that for the committee, this is what we're going to do. But the consultations run on into things like trees, but the final decision is in TDC. And those are matters reserved for the TDC part of the decision-making process. And we just have a look at what, if it does come to committee, of what the committee is to address on the night. Because yes, it's not fish or fowl. I have found it slightly confusing. We get all the objectors coming in, mainly objecting to what is in the part of the application report that's not relevant to the evening for a PIP. And I think that's a little bit of the frustration factor that comes in. Philip, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Mike, you'll add something to it.
Thank you, Chair. You know, it's just to, yeah, absolutely just to agree with the comments that both you and Councillor Potter have made. And I think the reason, I suppose, just to explain the reason the reports are set out in the way they are, is that I suppose theoretically trees could be a consideration in principle. So if you took an entirely different scenario where a site was covered in TPO trees, where it was clear that you couldn't accommodate 2 dwellings on the site, then it would be relevant. So you almost have to still go through the same process of consultation and at least referencing those points, just to then assess that they are relevant only to the technical details consent stage, as in this instance. I appreciate that's a very odd situation to have to go through, but I think Councillor Potter's a comparison to the sort of outline reserved matters approach is absolutely right, and that it does follow a similar path. Okay, dokie.
And by the way, in that example from Mike, we wouldn't even see that in front of committee anyway. Yeah, any other comments? Because we're in debate here. No, Councillor George, Councillor Tomlin again. George first, Tomlin second.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just fascinated in this one. It's very interesting, but clearly this relies on, again, the 5-year land supply. And what interests me is we're talking about yet another development in area of outstanding natural beauty, but it's not really been mentioned. And we've got a very significant landscape. It's not just objection, it's considered to be unacceptable. I understand that in the context, but I'm not terribly in favour with this one because it does rely on the 5-year land supply position to get it through. And if we've got objections of landscape in A and B, it's not something I can support, I'm afraid.
Well, again, we're back to this. That would be covered under the next stage of this application for the TDC. That gets into the kind of detail. This is where this is neither fish nor fowl, as Councillor Potter pointed out.
But
it's
sorry, Chair, we're not in a position fundamentally. There's a few grounds we can use to refuse a PIP, and landscape and its location in AOB are certainly those, aren't they? And that cannot be resolved with the technical details application.
Mike? Yeah, I think again, it is not always that clear, but I think the principle of the location, which is something for consideration under PIP, can be considered at this stage. So if a site was found to be just outright unacceptable for any development under PIP, then I think that ground could be pursued. I think the conclusions in the report are largely based on the site. They recognise obviously the landscape officer's view in relation to this particular development, but I think in issue the way that the site is relatively contained and doesn't perhaps have those wider views around, I think, is the main basis for the officer's recommendation. And then also that at the TDC stage, the final design of the buildings are then an opportunity to resolve that further. So I think that is the basis on which the recommendation is made. Philip may wish to add to that.
Philip?
Thank you, Chair. It would just be to reinforce Mike's comments. I suppose, yes, the location as a matter of principle could be something that's discussed or disagreed with. As Mike says, if it is so harmful that anything in this location would be acceptable, then that's up for councillors to decide and discuss. As Mike says, the officer has considered, given the built up and location of it, and the context of the site, it didn't consider that those harms would be so sufficient that it couldn't be dealt with at the technical details consent stage. But yes, it is a matter that can be discussed if councillors so wish.
Okay, Chris Tomlin, followed by Councillor Bound. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Well, yeah, that sort of explains the one concern, the AONB, but the fact that we've got this comment that it is an established built-up area and this low density, I think we don't have any. I think we don't have any grounds for 2 more houses in that site, given what the location plan shows us, and where we are with PIP and the technical matters. Take that all on board. So I'm quite happy to propose the officer's report for approval.
Right, thank you very much. I'll cover Councillor Bound and Councillor Leeks first, and then we'll see how we go.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I will happily support what Councillor Tomlin has said, but I mean, looking back at the past history, relevant planning history, at some stage it had 11 detached dwellings granted permission on it. That's on page 170 of the report. So 2 on this plot, which looks quite substantial to me. In terms of the PIP, I've got no problems with it at all.
Okay, Councillor Leeks.
Thank you, Chairman. Oh, God. I was just going to say that. So, what happens if he goes for a PIP, they get it, and then they take the trees down, sufficient trees down, and they come back, the trees are already down. What can we do about it?
I'll go back to officers. Mike, I believe that planning and print a PIP does not give them permission to start preparing a site, does it?
No. So to actually undertake development, the permission only going to be enacted once there's the PIP and the technical details consent. But I think it goes back to Philip's point earlier, which is that the trees aren't protected, so effectively there is no protection on them, irrespective of an application for development, one way or other. I think what we would certainly look to do at the technical details consent stage, assuming that the trees are still in place, and we've got no reason to doubt that they would be, albeit with my comment that there's no protection of them, then we would look to try and achieve a layout with the applicant that seeks to maximise, I suppose, the existing trees that are there. But ultimately, that is the applicant's choice, no different to the fact that they're not protected at the minute on a piece of land owned by the applicant.
Right. Been any more comments? Been moved and seconded for approval. I'll run through the roll call. Councillor Robinson.
For.
Councillor Leeks.
Abstain.
Councillor Goodison.
For.
Councillor George.
Against.
Councillor Grant.
For.
Councillor Frankham.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
For.
Councillor Bound.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Tomlin.
For.
Brenny.
have 9 for, 1 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. Now we go on to item number 5. Now, members, it's coming up to 8:30. Would you appreciate a comfort break? Yes, Mike. Sorry,
Chair.
conditions.
Officers there to confirm the decision.
Confirm the conditions. Yes, I was too eager to let these guys have a comfort break. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. So that application has been approved and is granted for a minimum of 1, maximum of 2 dwellings on the site, subject to the list of exceptions for information that needs to be submitted as part of the technical detail consent stage, which are listed at the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. 5 minutes be enough? Yep. 5 minutes. Be back here at 25 to.
That's the wrong one.
Mute. Right. I think we're all back now. Councillor McCormick. Just wait for him to come back. There he is. Councillor Frankham, I'm waiting for now. Councillor Frankham, are you there yet? Councillor Frankham. There you go. Right, we're all back and we'll move on to item number 5, the Lee Cedars. And if I could ask Mr. Cooper to check in, please.
Hi there, Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, Mr. Cooper. If you'd just like to hang on, the officers will introduce the application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 5 is for the property Lee Cedars, which is in Winchester Street, Overton. Planning permission is sought for a first floor extension to create additional living accommodation, together with alterations to the remainder of the property. Given the topography of the site, the works also include the creation of decking, which extend from the first floor level to connect to the upper garden. There's an update for this application, which is recommended for permission, subject to conditions as per the agenda. Thank you.
Mr. Cooper, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening to the committee, and thank you for allowing me to speak in regards to my application. I'd like to start by saying that this is a scheme for my growing family. My partner and I have worked hard with our architect to find the best scheme for our home. Discussions have been ongoing with the planning officer to get to an acceptable scheme. And amendments to the original scheme have been made, which include adjustments to the roof lights to prevent overlooking to neighbours, changes to the roof layout and dormers to better suit the street scene, changing materials to be more in keeping, and higher balustrades and screening to the decking area to prevent overlooking to neighbours. In regards to the decking, my home is difficult to assess without a site visit. It was after the planning officer visited site back in September last year that a true understanding of the levels and natural screening could be appreciated, along with Ian Tilbury, who kindly visited and expressed his opinion in the report and stressed that only after visiting in person he understood the levels of the site. And I would also like to raise the fact that whilst this is a difficult time nationally, with difficulties arranging site visits, I'd like to thank the planner for her prompt response to queries and help through the process. So yeah, I would like to request that this is approved as it's been recommendations from the planning officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Members, any questions to the applicant? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that the balustrade heights around the balcony would be high enough to prevent overlooking of the neighbours' gardens. Could you tell us how high those balustrades will actually be?
Yeah, there's a, so, sorry, I'm just making my way down. I think it's in the report. I think it's quite detailed in the report, but it's a 1.8 metre screening.
Thank you.
And that's obviously, there's also natural screening beyond.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions to the applicant? Nope. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
Councillor Tilbury.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and off you go. You've got 4 minutes.
Thanks, Councillor Miller. Yeah, I think Mr. Cooper's made most of the points. I think this is one that you really, a site viewing would have been really useful. But having seen the photographs that the officer put up, I think you get quite an idea of how steep. Basically, those of you who know over, and it's on Winchester Street, the steep valley as you go out towards Mitchell that way. So this is sort of halfway up the hill. The house, and there are houses, the ones behind that are objecting to sort of suggesting they may be overlooked are actually on our ground. So I'm not sure how they will be overlooking this. They overlook this property, and I think their argument is they would see more of it. But as I said in and it's in the report there, I mean, they could actually just rebuild the land to the back of the house and put a patio on it and just have a little walkway across, and it would be the same height as the existing garden sort of overlooks the neighbours, but so do the neighbours overlook them at the moment because of the way they're cut into the hillside. It is a very unusual sort of setup, it's most of the sort of land around the village is rolling there, but on this, because it's on such a steep-sided valley, the way it's cut in really impacts on that. But obviously with the screening on the side, there is quite a thick edge on both sides as well, so you can't see into your neighbours anyway, although that could be removed or whatever. But because this is conditioned with the screening on the side of the sort of raised decking, then I really don't see there's an issue. And obviously, I think part of the problem is a lot of the comments were put in for the initial plans. Obviously, they've subsequently amended those to deal with officers' issues regarding the design of the building, and also to deal with that. So the comments from, let's say, the parish council, I don't think they've commented on the amended plan. So the comments in there relate to the original plan. So, but I mean, as you can probably guess, I support this. I can't see any real problem with it. The neighbours either side aren't objecting to it, and they're the ones who are most impacted. The ones behind, as you can see from the location plan, don't even appear on the location plan. That's how far away they are. So, and if you're in the rear garden and look at their property, you can't actually see the properties because there's sort of 1.9 metre high fences to the rear of this property and those properties. So it is all quite well screened. It is unusual to do it, but you can see the logic of having the living accommodation upstairs because it relates better to the garden because of the elevated height. But if you look at the terracing, it's basically you've got to walk up to the height of your first floor to get to your garden at the moment. So it actually makes far more sense to redo the property that way, and it relates well to the garden then. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Councillor Tilbury. Members, any questions for the ward councillor? I'd just like to echo his views about the unfortunate situation we're in not going on these site visits, because it makes all the difference. We've said it time and time again over the years, but it does give you an instant perspective of exactly what the application sites are all about. Thank you very much, Councillor Tilbury. Right. Questions to officers. Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the elevations on page 196. the second from the bottom, there's a considerable space underneath the decking. Can that be, I'm trying to understand it, can that be sort of walled in and made into a room? I mean, could somebody explain it? Perhaps when the office could explain it to me. I'm being a bit thick.
I think, if I'm correct, that you are referring to the south elevation when you're looking at your agenda on page 196.
Yep.
Both the north and south on the visualizer in front of you, there is a void underneath the proposed decking area. I mean, in terms of whether it's being closed, it's quite possible there would be permitted development rights on this site that would enable rear additions in any event. So that's something that would have to be considered at that stage. But at the moment, as you say, what we are considering is before you as secured within the conditions.
Right, okay. I'm not sure whether my question was answered, whether it could be or couldn't be, but with permitted development rights, are you saying it might be?
I mean, looking at, I mean, yes, it's creating a void, it's creating sort of a canopy over an external area where obviously you're addressing the topography of the site. So notwithstanding the potential to obviously put sides on the decking, there is potentially permitted development rights in any way to extend the property out to the rear regardless. So you would still end up with the same effect. I don't have my permitted development rights in front of me, so hence why I do apologise, I'm being slightly vague.
Okay.
So, yes, you could potentially enclose it, but actually it could be permitted development.
Councillor McCormick.
Chair, if I may, it may just simply be that they want that lower story. There's a window and two doors on the back. They may want to retain the windows and doors for natural lighting.
The same thing had occurred to me as well. Yeah. Any more questions to officers, members? In that case, we'll jump into debate. And Councillor Leeks, then Tomlin.
I was just going to say I'm happy to propose it, Chairman. That was all.
Councillor Tomlin.
Well, and I'm very happy to second it.
If there's no other debate and we're content with the officer's recommendation, I will, as we've been proposed and seconded, I will call the roll. Councillor Robinson.
For.
Councillor Leeks.
For.
For. Councillor Goodison.
For.
Councillor George.
For.
Councillor Grant.
For.
Councillor Frankham.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
For.
Councillor Bound.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
And Councillor Tomlin.
For.
Bernie.
That's 11 for the recommendation.
Thank you very much, officers.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is approved, subject to the conditions as per the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll crack on to item number 6 and Mr. Cobbold, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Cobbold. If you just hang tight while we introduce the application, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Item number 6, which can be found on page 198 of tonight's agenda, is an outline application for the erection of one dwelling, including access and layout. If I could draw members' attention to the update paper, there was a further letter of public observation received, which has been presented in full on the update. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed at the end of the officer's report. Thank you.
And before you run away, Philip, and this is for how many bedrooms again?
So this is an outline application, councillor. So the layout isn't.
Okay,
the
that's
details
fine.
aren't fully known at this stage, but
yeah. I noticed that in the report there's an indicative parking layout. Right. Mr. Cobbold, you have 4 minutes. Off you go.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I've watched the committee thus far, and there seems to be a familiar theme to these applications here. Small developments outside defined settlements, but sustainable nonetheless due to their locations and the absence of the 5-year land supply. So whilst the argument being put forward by applicants and planning consultants such as me may appear repetitive, of course, this doesn't mean that the approach should change. In the absence of sufficient sites, allocations or sites within settlement boundaries, such proposals must remain the best source of alternative new housing. This application itself actually started with a linear development of 4 houses and has been reduced incrementally in number until the officers were happy that the benefits of the housing outweighed the visual impact. Of course, applicants keen to negotiate here when there's potential for a positive outcome rather than having the burden of an appeal. And it shows, I think, that the system's working. It's not a free-for-all in the countryside, it's a controlled approach to housing development, which I think we should all welcome. In terms of the proposal, you've been presented with a well-written report. That's fine. I've got nothing really to add to that. It's a pleasant site, which is right on the edge of the current built-up area. It's far from being isolated. Pamber Green, actually, in all but local plan designation, is clearly a settlement. And it's been established recently. It's capable of accommodating a few more houses in a sustainable manner. This development itself continues a style and type of development which is prevalent both to the south and north of New Road, family houses and comfortable plots with private parking and good sized amenity space. Just a few points to cover from the third parties really rather than the committee report. Parish Council and third parties talk about Greenland, which is a bit peculiar to me. I'll ignore the suggestion of green belt. Greenland also is not a planning designation or definition. And it doesn't subsequently tally with the proposals or the suggestions. The proposals are going to be an extension of a settlement boundary. There's no settlement boundary here to extend. The site's not in a flood zone. It's upstream of a critical drainage area, which you'll know about through CN7 and the requirements for that, but it doesn't insinuate in any way the site will flood or that flooding is an issue. The site is flood zone 1, lowest possible flooding status, and the drainage report shows that it won't lead to any flooding issues away from the site. Another consistent objection, as you'll have seen, is the highway impact. I think the impact of one dwelling on the highway, taking on average one vehicle movement every few hours, is not really grounds for objecting to a planning application, irrespective of the nature of the road outside. And in this case, I think the road is perfectly capable of accommodating a few more houses or just the one we've got here. Final point from the Parish Council and third parties is the suggestion that there's no local need to justify the proposal. The term local, as you know, isn't defined in the local plan, but there's a suggestion that it's a parish-based issue. Obviously, this is a district or borough-based issue, the 5-year land supply and the housing need in Basingstoke and Dean. So whilst only a single dwelling, it will help address the housing need of the area, even if it's a one by one and to trickle like this is. So hopefully you can approve this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cobbold. Members, questions to the applicant? Councillor Leeks.
Yes, good evening. Can you tell me roughly how far you are from the A340? It's a bit difficult to tell on the plan.
I can tell you exactly because I have Google Images open, one of the masterful things of computers, 315.08 metres.
Thank you very much. That is where the bus route is. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned this was upstream of a critical drainage area. Can you tell us very roughly, geographically, where water from this site, surface water, would actually drain? Am I right in thinking it drains towards Bramley?
I honestly can't answer that. Sorry, I don't have the answer to hand.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions, members? Thank you, Mr. Cobbold. That's it. And now questions to officers about this outline application. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Back to the previous question, really. I've no problem in principle with this building, but I am worried that an awful lot of the land in this area drains towards Bramley, and Bramley has massive problems with surface water issues at the moment. Would it be possible for us to condition some form of water attenuation within the site to alleviate exacerbating any problems in Bramley, or indeed anywhere else that it drains into that's a critical drainage area?
Thank you, Councillor. The application has been supported by a flood risk assessment, which concludes that any runoff or anything from the property would discharge into the soakaways that are to be provided on site, and it's not considered that surface water runoff would be an issue or cause flooding elsewhere. That's is sufficient from our perspective that that information has been submitted by a consultant, and that's considered to be acceptable. There aren't any conditions with regards to attenuation on the site, but it's considered that the submitted flood risk assessment was sufficient for the scale of the application. Perhaps, I'm not sure if Mike wants to say anything on that matter as well, but yes, it was considered that what was proposed was acceptable, and that was sufficient for the officer.
Yeah, just to follow on from Philip's explanation then, in terms of for refer members to page 218.
Oh, 18.
Of the agenda. Condition 16 says that notwithstanding the submitted details, no development shall commence on site until an amended flood risk assessment has been submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority. My assumption there being that effectively through the consultation process there are elements still for review, and I think that is the mechanism by which the issue about ensuring appropriate surface water drainage can be secured would be achieved. Councillor Robinson.
So if I may, Chair, so we are in a position where we could insist on some attenuation.
Yes, so I think that would be the intention of the updated surface water, flood risk assessment secured by condition 16, and that could certainly be assisted by possibly an informative note outlining the committee's concerns about trying to achieve attenuation on site through that process. That informative note could absolutely be added, Councillor Robinson, if that would assist.
Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the same issue, really, if I may, knowing the area a little, but as I recall, I mean, all of the dwellings in that area are served by soakaways, all of which I think perform fairly satisfactorily to my knowledge, really, in terms of surface water problems or not in that area. I mean, I take Councillor Robinson's point about attenuation, but if soakaways are effective in their operation and there's enough of them to take the various sources of surface water, they can be very effective, and I'm sure they won't contribute to the flooding of Bramley over much. So I think that type of scheme can be worked out fairly effectively.
Okay. Any more questions to officers? Debate? Outline application? If there's nothing in debate, I'll move it from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McCormack?
Chair, I do have my hand up.
Can't see it covering your face. Councillor McCormack, I saw.
Happy to second it. Happy to give way to Councillor Robinson, whose hand seems to be disappearing into the mountain landscape quicker than a bunch of British skiers trying to evade a quarantine.
That's the problem with some of the backgrounds. Your hand disappears. But Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor McCormack for giving way. I'm quite basically content with this. So I would be happy to propose it or second it, whichever way it goes. Subject to something being included about water attenuation. Bramley, I suspect this water drains towards Bramley. I'm not absolutely convinced of it, but wherever it drains, particularly in Bramley, I've seen so many reports that saying, "Oh, fine, the drainage is up to it," and I understand what Councillor Potter said about soakways, but the reality in Bramley is when it rains, people at the lowest point of Bramley get sewage bubbling up in their gardens because the surface water drainage isn't up to it. So I'm happy to propose it if we can have a suitable clause on water attenuation. Thank you.
Officers?
Chair, for me, I think, as I say, the appropriate way to do that would be, I think the condition goes as far as it can in terms of condition 16. I think the appropriate way to do that would be with the addition of an informative note, picking up the committee's concerns around seeking a solution which seeks to assure secure attenuation on site.
Are you content, Councillor Robinson?
Yep, I'm content with that. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Well, I think I beat you to the proposal. I've said it, it's on the record, but if you're prepared to second it, I'll thank Councillor McCormack for his offer there. So it's proposed and seconded for approval as per the recommendation in the report, with the addition of a suitable informative, making condition 16 perfectly clear about the attenuation requirement that we've just been talking about. On that basis, I'll do the roll call, and it's Councillor Robinson first of all.
For.
I am for it. I moved it from the chair. Councillor Leeks.
For.
Councillor Goodison.
For.
George.
For.
Councillor Grant.
For.
Councillor Frankham.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor McCormack.
For.
Councillor Bound.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Tomlin.
For.
Bernie.
That's 12 for the recommendation.
Thank you. And officers, if we can confirm those conditions.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is approved subject to the conditions listed at the end of the officer's report and the inclusion of an additional informative with regards to the on-site surface water drainage provision and securing on-site attenuation basins. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Move on to item number 7. And Mr. Griffin, please.
Chair, Mr. Griffin doesn't seem to have joined the meeting yet.
Okay, I'll ask the officers to introduce the application and then we'll see if he's pitched up. Catherine, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 7 is for the property 25 Milking Pen Lane, which is in Old Basing, where planning permission is sought to replace the existing bungalow with a 4-bedroom property over 2 stories. In conjunction with these works, it is also
Hello there. So I'm here.
the front garden and install new retaining walls to create a space that can provide on-site parking where there is presently none. And this will take place with use of a shared access onto the highway. There's no update for the application, which is recommended for permission, subject to conditions as per the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Good evening, Mr. Griffin, and you're just in time and you've got 4 minutes. And Mr. Griffin, you're still muted.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, yes.
Hi, sorry about
that. You've got 4 minutes, so off you go.
Okay, I'll get started then. Good evening, my name is Nick Griffin. I'm the Managing Director of Inception Planning Limited. I'm a Chartered Town... Sorry,
You're still there.
I'm having technical difficulties here. Sorry about this.
Right, I'm going to stop your clock.
Hello?
Yep. Are you ready to go?
Hello, can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes, we've been.
Yes,
You had
sorry
an
about
open
this.
mic for the last couple of
Sorry.
minutes.
It's been having problems here.
Are you ready to start?
Yes.
Off you go. You've got 4 minutes.
Okay, great. Right. We note that your officers have provided a full assessment. Sorry, this is.
Now we've lost you again. Julia, can you track Mr. Griffin at all?
I'll see whether we can make contact with him because he's actually dropped out of the meeting completely at the moment.
Yeah, that's what I can see from my screen. I just wondered if you saw something I didn't.
No, I can see whether we can contact him.
Thank you. Yes, Anne. You're muted, Anne.
Chair, if there are any other public speakers, you could take those and go back to Mr. Griffin, if that helps.
No, but thank you very much, but he's the only one.
Okay.
But thank you for the suggestion. Ah, back again. Mr. Griffin.
Hello there.
Hello there.
Sorry about this.
Do you think you'll be able to continue?
I would hope so. It keeps cutting out and then repeating itself. If you can hear me now, okay, I think we can proceed.
Fine. You've got 4 minutes. Off you go. Mr. Griffin, I'm awfully sorry, but your technical, he's gone again. I'm going to crack on with this. We've got a report before us. It's been introduced. If Mr. Griffin comes back, he's in support of this application. I'm going to ask if you have any questions to officers, members. Now, Councillor Goodison, you've had, you're not down to speak specifically as the ward councillor, but I'll give you a chance to speak if you wish to. Yeah, you were open mic, now you've put the mic on mute again.
I'd like to make a statement if I may.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, right, I'll go straight in. First of all, let me say away, I don't have any problems with this application. However, there is one very serious matter which I need to bring to your attention and which needs to be resolved. And that is that on page 223, it accurately states the development would not cause an adverse impact on highway safety. That is completely correct. However, the construction of the development could cause the most catastrophic problems with traffic safety on Milking Pen Lane. It would be very helpful if we could bring back those 3 photographs we saw earlier of the approaches to the site.
If I can just interrupt you, Councillor Potter. Sorry, Councillor Goodison. I'm just going to let you know, Councillor Goodison, that at the pre-meet, we specifically identified this as an issue to be addressed at committee, and Meredith, who's running the visual slides, has got these slides specially prepared for you.
Yeah, but I just wanted to point out,
but please do.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out for those people who are unfamiliar with the site that here you see the access. It's very narrow. It's just wide enough for one domestic car, one normal car to go up. There's no turning circle at the top. The car would, even a car would need to back down into Milton Pen Lane, and that's fair enough. They do that already, so that's not a problem. Point I'm trying to make is that no delivery lorry can possibly access that point. They would need to unload here. Milking Pen Lane, as you can see here, is quite narrow. There's no pedestrian way. There are no grass verges of any sort. If a lorry was parked right where we see it now, where the delivery lorry would be discharging, it would completely block Milton Pen Lane. The local school primary school is open at the moment. On Friday morning, I watched a substantial number of cars coming along this lane, having come down Piatt's Hill from Lichford and Chinham, bringing pupils to the school at the other end of Milking Pen Lane. If there's a lorry there, they would not be able to pass. They could barely got room in Milking Pen Lane to even turn round and try to get back. There would be a complete shambles. During term time, it's very, very necessary that between 8:30 and 9:30 in the morning, and between 2:30 and 3:30 in the afternoon, there are no deliveries being made at this point on Milking Pen Lane. Otherwise, there would be the most horrendous blockage and lots of very angry people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodison, for that. Yes, as I said, it became very evident when we were going through it earlier on that there's an issue there, and I think we can address this with a discussion with officers in a minute. Well, questions to officers. Catherine, you heard that from Councillor Goodison, which is something around what we discussed at the pre-meet, and the only possible solution would be in the construction method statement, because they're going to demolish one building and then have to build another one. And I think all of us have got an appreciation of the kind of traffic movements that's going to generate.
Absolutely. I mean, if I can assist members at all, is the approach here would be, could be, it would be your decision, to impose a condition securing a construction method statement which looks at the transportation, the types of vehicles, the number of vehicles, the timing of vehicles relating to the construction process. Such a condition would be a pre-commencement condition, so to capture everything relating to the development. Therefore, should members be minded to consider the imposition of such a condition, there would actually also need to be a slight alteration to the recommendation before you, because as a council, we are required to serve notice upon an applicant when we are imposing a pre-commencement condition, and we have to give them a required period in which to respond to that. And members will be familiar with that approach because it's been touched upon a number of times within the reports for you this evening where we provided updates, and that sits underneath the Town and Country Planning pre-commencement regulations. So we have to do that. So a condition, and it would need to go hand in hand with an alteration to the recommendation before you, should you be minded to go along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you for that advice. Councillor Goodison, I think that was good advice, recognising your concerns about the whole issue about that particular access down Milking Pen Lane. Those of us that have ever been down there certainly appreciate your immediate concerns and the turn-in access to that particular site. Are there any other questions to officers on this? Bearing in mind that's probably the major one we've got to address. Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, Joe, just to clarify what was said. I mean, if we change the recommendation or the detail, I mean, does that mean we have to refuse it and it has to come back, or?
No, this is recommendation for approval. So yeah. We would, and with the concerns about access of these vehicles, as Catherine just described, then the recommendation would have to, because a pre-commencement condition has its own criteria, it
Yeah.
has to be given notice to the applicant.
So-
Now,
so we-
whether that infers a deferment, I don't know. I think it would just be included as a condition. Catherine?
If I can assist there, my suggestion, and of course Mike may want to clarify it all, is that the recommendation is a delegate to the planning and development manager to first serve notice, seek agreement. If we receive agreement,
Absolutely.
then approve as per the conditions in the agenda. I hope that's what doesn't matter.
Yeah. All right.
And we've done that before. Yeah.
Yeah, that's clear, because I mean, just building on Councillor Goddison, I mean, that bridge that we see in the photo, you will not get the normal delivery vehicles under, which means they'd have to reverse backwards or forwards into Milking Pen Lane from a very narrow chicanery in the middle by the Bolton Arms. So
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely. It needs careful planning, and okay, I'm quite happy with that. Thank you.
Okay, good. Any more on that scale? Councillor Potter?
I just wanted to check, I mean, there are a number of references to number 27, the next property, in regard to, I guess, right of light and all the rest of it and overlooking. But in terms of access, there must have been discussions about this. Is everybody content that the residents of 27 can continue to have unfettered access whilst all this is going on? Because they share the same access drive, don't they? Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Just
okay, that's a question to officers. We'll come back to it in a minute. I've got Anne Greaves wants to mention something here.
Chair, I just wanted to clarify, Councillor Godson spoke as a visiting councillor, didn't he? And therefore he won't take part in the making of the decision.
Yeah, this is always a grey area. Sits on the committee. He happens to be the ward member, and I invited him to speak.
I'm quite happy not to take part in the decision-making process if that's required. I don't know the applicants. I have no knowledge of the applicants. I'm not personally involved in any way, but I'm quite happy not to vote if that's what's required.
Yeah, I think my concern would be Councillor Goddison said he was making a statement which suggests to me that he was speaking as a visiting councillor rather than just an ordinary member of the committee. So I think it would be wise after he's finished answering any questions that he doesn't take any further part.
Fair enough. Thank you, Anne, for that. Appreciate that. I'm quite sure Councillor Goodison understands as well. Catherine, can we come back to the other question about the access that Councillor Potter mentioned? You're muted.
Sorry.
I think I'm going to get fed up having to say that. It's going to be the Zoom quote of the year.
Okay, so the concern was with regards to the access for the neighbouring residents at number 27 during the construction period, in order to be able to access their own property given the relationship to the driveway. I mean, that sort of matter can be borne out within the construction method statement that we would seek to condition, if members wish to. However, it could also be reinforced to ensure that unfettered access is provided by way of an informative, if that should be something that members would like, to add on, just to reinforce that position.
Okay, Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm sure that's helpful. I mean, it doesn't seem to be any issue between the neighbours really, and I don't want to create one, but it just seems to me that by any definition, looking at that layout, it's going to be a potential problem as the development takes place. But with goodwill on all sides, I'm sure it can be accommodated really. But it was if it can be incorporated and sustained, supported by an informative, I think that would be helpful really.
Fine. Any more questions to officers? No, we've got that sorted out. No debate. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I know this bit of road very well, and I've often looked at this drive as I've driven past it and thought, my God, that's a difficult drive. And certainly everything that Councillor Godison has said, I agree with. What I can't get my head round is how any construction method statement is going to solve this problem. As most of you know, I drive a transit-sized van. I'd be very, very surprised if I could get my van off Milking Pen Lane and onto that driveway. And if I did, I wouldn't be able to turn around once I got on there. So I would have to reverse back with no sight lines whatsoever back onto Milking Pen Lane. And I just cannot see any way around that. So in terms of construction traffic, it's horrendous. And that's just a transit-sized van, never mind the sort of sized vehicles that building materials come on, which is going to block Milking Pen Lane at some point when whatever time of day or night they deliver, Milking Pen Lane is going to be blocked. But further on than that, the existing site, according to the report, has no vehicular access, and shown on this drawing now, we've got 3 cars parked on page 237.
Yeah.
There's insufficient room for them to turn round. So they're going to have to reverse out of this site. And from that is just going to be downright dangerous and an ongoing situation. I really, really cannot support this. If this is going to be developed, even leaving out the construction traffic site, the house needs moving to the right on the plan, and enough space needs to be given for vehicles to turn round. And even then, I've got my reservations, because you won't be able to turn left out of the site, which means they're going to go down the road, do a 3-point turn. You can't turn right into this site. I really, really cannot support this. Thank you.
Right. Any more for debate? Councillor McCormick?
I would be supporting this in principle. The thing that really does pose a real conundrum is the access issue with that low bridge and the narrow lane, and the thought of trucks backing up a considerable distance, and the access for number 27. But I'm inclined to believe that these are problems that the developer has to sort out. Otherwise, they're not going to get this development through. But I would be happy to move the recommendation on the basis that the officers will come up with a sufficient informative and notice given.
If I could pass comment on that, what you just made, because the delegation to the plan development manager means that if they're not satisfied, whatever comes up from the developer to maintain that access with all the caveats that we've discussed this evening, then he will have the power to refuse the application. And I think with that kind of protection in the delegation, which we've done before, because it's, we've seen them appear before on our paperwork, that's, if you like, the safety valve at the end of all this. I don't know if I'll go back to Mike here now.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just I suppose just to clarify, there's two routes. So I think the route that Catherine has mentioned before is that you impose a pre-commencement condition, yes, requiring a construction method statement, and that is effectively the reason it needs to be delegated back to my role, planning development manager, is to enable that process of seeking agreement through notice. So a 10-day period where we have to agree a pre-commencement condition with an applicant beforehand. That is only in terms of the imposition of the condition. Then planning permission would be granted, and then the details would follow. That's not quite the same, I suppose, if you like, as it being delegated to officers to secure the information first prior to the planning permission going out. So I think what Catherine was suggesting was imposition of a pre-commencement condition, which would require to agree with the developer, and then the details would follow post permission. But the key point is that they can't start development as a pre-commencement until those matters have been resolved.
Right. Does that satisfy you, Councillor McCormick?
I think it does, yes. At the end of the day, it's a question of practicality, isn't it, for with some very challenging topology.
Councillor Potter. You're muted, David.
Sorry. This has been considered by highways officers and our own planning officers. It's worth reading, I think, the third paragraph down on page 231. The simple fact is, I mean, Milton Pen Lane is a nightmare in regard to this type of car usage. Always has been, always will be, really. Councillor Goddison would say far more about this given the opportunity, I'm sure. But it's solvable. All of it is solvable in terms of delivery vehicles. And I take Councillor Robinson's point. By definition, it's going to have to be small deliveries of building materials. And reversing out onto Milking Pen Lane is not an unknown feature, as that paragraph that I've referred to quotes. I mean, it happens all the time now. Yes, it's an additional danger, but it's manageable in Basing terms. That's the fact of it. As you come out of that drive, I mean, there are a number of ways. You don't have to do a U-turn. You can go around and then go down the street. I mean, there are a number of ways this can be overcome. And then, to be frank, if this becomes insurmountable, you can't redevelop in Milking Pen Lane at all, really, and that would be a nonsense. And I think this scheme's been well thought through, and it will be an improvement of the property that's there at the present time, as the officer's report says. So I support it.
Right, Councillor Bound. Councillor Bound, you're muted. It's catching us all out.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm not in agreement with David on this one, but I'm in agreement with Nick. I mean, I think the construction method statement might be able to overcome the construction side of things, but I think we are building into a scheme here huge risk for people who actually live in the property, in that they will have to back out of that property on a very, very narrow roadway onto a road which they can't see what's coming. I don't see how they can possibly see what's coming from either direction, and we're building in that risk. I for that reason, and that reason only, I can't go along with the scheme.
Councillor George, I'll come back to you, Councillor Robinson.
I've been trying to think this one through as well and have a look at it, but the thing that really concerns me is they've got to demolish a building, they've got to take back the reason that fundamentally there's cars are there is because they're going to take back that retaining wall, and that's going to require huge amounts of material to be removed. So we're going to have heavy trucks there just to get the thing started, and that's my real concern. You know, I was trying to think, well, if they had moved the retaining wall back and they could provide some area there that trucks could come up on and deliver things and do what, that'd be working. But just to get to the point where you've got to pay somewhere on site that you can actually put a delivery vehicle or a thing, you're going to have to take lots of material away, and actually it's underneath the existing building actually. So it's going to be very technically difficult to do this. So I really do believe that we've got to go along something like, you know, we do with the 106, is making the planning application dependent upon us getting a solution for this.
Okay, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to draw everyone's attention to one thing, leaving out the construction issues, but the ongoing, once it possibly becomes a residential property. Page 231, paragraph 3, states the driveway already has restrictions to its accessibility. However, this is an extant and long-standing position. I'm sorry, but that statement is incorrect. Because this property at the moment doesn't have vehicular access. I appreciate the one next door does, but this property doesn't. So the situation that is there with the next door house is different in so much as there is space for their cars to turn round. For this proposal, the cars can't turn round. They're going to be reversing out onto a single track road, which is just down the road from the local primary school, where children, and it's a walk to school route. They're going to be reversing out in the morning onto a road not full of children. There are no pavements. It's single track. There are kids walking down there, and it's blind. And if we haven't had a proposal for approval, I would like to propose refusal. Thank you.
Right, before I take it, Councillor McCormick, I've got to mention that it is 9:30, and I thank you, Councillor Frankham. I was aware of that. We've got one more application to deal with after this. Yes, Anne?
Chair, I'm sure you know, but you can't take a second proposal once you've got one on the table.
Oh, yes, sorry about that. Yes, yeah, I am. But as far as the time is concerned, past 9:30, do I have the agreement of the committee to get as far as 10 o'clock, and we'll see this? I've got thumbs up all round.
Agreed.
10 o'clock, we've just got the other one to address. Right, coming back to this, as Angry's just reminded us, Councillor Robinson, I'm going to park you right there. We have got a motion to approve this with the caveats, and I've got you, Councillor McCormick, down for that. Is that right, Councillor McCormick?
Well, just picking up on the point made about cars turning, there are solutions to that, because there's an example I can think of in Gracemere Crescent where, as part of the planning application, a turntable was put in to facilitate cars being turned round. And if it was minded for the committee to insist on a proposal like that, I'd take advice from the officers as to how best we could do that. But that is an option if the committee was so minded.
Okay, I think when we start coming down to, yes, Mike, but I just make a comment, if it's valid, that we don't come up with solutions at the committee. I think we would come up with, say, a solution was to be provided to enable, and words to that effect. What the solution might be, well, that'll be up to the applicant to be satisfied by the local planning authority. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. It was just picking up on Councillor McCormack's suggestion, and I know that's been used in various occasions. My only comment, I think, would be looking at the location plan and the site plan on page 237. I would doubt whether there's enough room, in all honesty, for vehicles to turn, given that the way that they're sort of stacked one against the other. So I think it does come down to ultimately, I guess, considering the motion, which is, as I understand it, would be is the motion for approval with the pre-commencement condition around construction method statement, Chair, but I wasn't quite clear whether that has been seconded or not. So perhaps it's worth just clarifying the motion in the first instance and going from there.
And Councillor Potter, you.
Well, I'm happy to second it in an unadulterated way, just as it stands. Really, I mean, we can't get into design formulas, and we either approve what's before us or we don't. You know.
Yes, and but I would suggest that I think there's, if we're going to go ahead for approval, we need that pre-commencement construction method statement and the associated informative included as well in the motion.
That's okay. That's fine.
That's okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
So let's take this one step at a time, bearing in mind we've been listening to all the debate about parking and/or construction vehicles. So moved and seconded for approval with those caveats and additions. And I'll run through the roll call. Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Leeks.
Against.
Councillor Goodison. Councillor Goodison not affected. Councillor George. For. Councillor Grant.
For.
Councillor Frankham.
Abstain.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
For.
Councillor Bound.
Against.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Tomlin.
Against.
Bernie.
I have 5 for the recommendation, 4 against and 1 abstention.
That is carried. Officers?
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is to be delegated to the Planning and Development Manager to first serve notice for the imposition of the pre-commencement condition securing a construction method statement. If agreement is received, then approve, subject to the conditions in the agenda, together with the additional condition for the construction method statement, and an informative to advise that the neighbouring property retains access during the construction process. Thank you.
Right, Councillor McCormick, are you happy with that?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair, but I thought I heard 2 abstentions.
I went through this. There was 1 abstention I noted against Councillor Frankham. And that's why I cross-check with, I have my own record here, which I'm quite happy to produce.
Appreciate that. Obviously, I obviously miscounted. Thank you.
And I agreed absolutely with Brenny's appreciation of it. I always cross-check. I'll tell you the system sometime. Fine. That is that one dealt with. Don't think I've got anything. No, we've addressed it to the officers. Move on to item number 8, Hillside Farm, Andover Road. No speakers. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 8, which can be found on page 240 of tonight's agenda, is an application for the removal of conditions 6 and 7 of Planning Permission 19-02178/FUL. If I can draw members' attention to the update paper, a revised block plan has been submitted, and as you can see from the update paper, the area which the application refers to is outlined in purple. And as a result, condition 1 has been amended to reflect the substituted plan. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed at the end of the officer's report. Thank you.
Right. Questions to officers. Are we all clear of the implications of the withdrawal of these 2 conditions? Can we have the committee back, please, so I can see everybody? Right, Councillor McCormick.
It's a trivial one to ask, but on the paper it says registered 8th October 2020, expiry date 18th January 2020. Is that correct, or should that be 2021?
Thank you, Councillor. I would imagine it would be 2021. We can double check on our internal system, but it's perhaps an early start to the year, and yeah, not quite appreciating the change of date. But yes, it's most likely for 2021.
Councillor George.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like, just as a question to officers again, to fully understand why these conditions need to be removed. The way I see it very simply is that condition 6 was the pre-commencement condition which we asked for, and clearly, if, as shown, the reports that we've seen, the reports are adequate, and that they've already completed those investigations in accordance with the British standards, etc., and there's no remediation required, I'm guessing that fundamentally why and what condition 6 is therefore discharged, isn't it? It's gone if we were happy. So why does it need to be removed? And I have some suspicions here. Because I am really concerned. I've seen those investigations, and literally they're quite cursory. They're not. I'm wondering if can we confirm that they've been done in accordance with British Standard 10157, and are we happy with the conclusions of that? And are we happy that there's no remedial works required? The other reason I'm concerned about this is it includes methods for remedial works, etc., which may be necessary should they find other materials on site. So I'm really concerned about removing the condition rather than it being discharged. It's totally unnecessary. And the same thing, condition 7 doesn't apply unless prior to the site's been occupied board. So there's no stopping them doing anything at the moment. So can you please explain to me why this needs to be removed? Because I don't understand it at all.
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, the application, a discharge of conditions application would perhaps be the usual route to deal with this type of application. The information submitted was considered by the environmental health team and officers to be sufficient to, if you like, in effect, discharge the conditions, and therefore they had no objection to their removal from the application. I can't attest to why this application was submitted rather than a discharge of condition application was submitted, but in either case, sufficient information is considered to have been submitted and is considered acceptable. Just to note, there is an additional condition, condition 8, which has been added just to ensure that if anything further were found on the site, that it's sort of work stopped and reported to the local authority to sort of address the matters then. So yeah, I don't know if that sufficiently answers the question, but yeah, the information submitted was considered to be sufficient.
Councillor George.
Well, thank you for that, but I'm still concerned that by removing these conditions, it does remove protection from the site. I understand condition 8 has been added there, but you know, I think it removes the necessity of the applicant here to conform with condition 6, and we want that as a backstop fundamentally. If at any time we get into trouble in the future and we can show that they haven't conducted these investigations correctly, we have absolutely no means of saying to them, you need to go back and do it properly. And that's what concerns me on this one. We're removing protection. And unless he's categorically stated, and we're categorically happy that they have done this thing properly and they've found everything on site. And frankly, I've looked at it and it's not thorough in any way. It doesn't bottom out any deposits. There's 4 trench holes on the site, which are scattered. And frankly, I think it gives some comfort in terms of the sites, but I've got no confirmation that it's been done in accordance with these standards at all.
I think there's a question to you, Philip.
Chair, I'll answer that one. I mean, I think firstly, it is a slightly unusual situation, I suppose, to have an application which effectively would normally, as Philip's explained, be submitted for discharge of conditions information. And I think as the report sets out, had that approach been taken, I think those matters would have been discharged, and yeah, the development would continue. So I absolutely agree it is an unusual situation. I think in terms of what we can report this evening, the only comfort I can provide Councillor George, if he considers that it's not been done appropriately, is that, as Philip's already set out and is set out on page 250 and 251 of the report, is that the Environmental Health Officer has looked at the reports, is satisfied that they meet the requirements for what would have in any case been secured by conditions 6 and 7. And in particular, I draw attention to then, I suppose, second paragraph on page 251, which is where you've got a section 73 application suggesting removal of conditions. You can impose, sort of reimpose or impose new conditions to ensure that there are necessary safeguards impacted by what this proposal is. And that is effectively why that condition 8 has then been added, so that I guess ultimately through the information submitted in support of the application in terms of the contaminated land report, the review by environmental health, and then the additional safeguard of condition 8, it effectively achieves the same thing as what was intended through condition 6 and 7 of the original permission. I know that's a very confusing position, Chair. I don't know if there's any other way that I can explain the application for you. That's the basis of the recommendation.
Thank you for that, Ike. Councillor George, could I just ask, I'll ask you, because I understand this is part of your professional background anyway, is condition 8 does it take you any further towards the protection that you're seeking? It's interesting because I couldn't find a reference to additional condition 8 anywhere in the text, but now we know about it.
Yeah, certainly, Chair, looking at that really just takes it from the bottom of condition 6 and includes, should further works in the future find anything, we may have to, go through some remedial exercise. But the reason for my concern about this is because the reason given for this removal is to enable them to move forward to what have you. So fundamentally, if they've done this work, they should be able to remove forward, and the conditions should be discharged. So I'm concerned here that in lots of ways that we don't have any ability, if they've removed this condition, to go back and say, sorry, there's other areas of the site that have got material on that you haven't covered, and you haven't found this material, and you haven't done it properly. And the pressure you've got is the fact that the whole concerns initially was because we didn't know what was there, and in the context that material was on site, which has to be removed, and the instructions of the Environment Agency, which clearly must contain materials which are hazardous. What we have they're removing the protection. That's probably the reason that they're doing this, or possibly the reason that material. Let me move forward.
Councillor Harvey.
Would it be reasonable then to defer the application, asking the officers to address Councillor George's concerns, get the information, but also secure comfort with the conditions that might be proposed in place of, or the retention of, depending upon the information received? I mean, to me, that's a logical way forward, isn't it? I think I'd move that if Councillor George felt that answered his questions. I don't want to override what he's saying. He wants to move it. I'll happily second it.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Just perhaps the officers could just clarify. We're on page 250 and 251, and it's saying that condition 6 was requesting a site investigation report documenting the ground conditions, but a contaminated land intrusive investigation report has been given. What's the difference? Is the one we asked for more thorough than the one that's been done? They've got different names, so I'd just like some help, please.
Councillor Tomlin, I'll be honest, I think it's just simply a recording of the title of and that second one, the a contaminated land intrusive investigation report. I think it's simply referring to the title of the document that's been submitted. My understanding is that it is effectively the same that was envisaged by condition 6 in the first instance. So I think effectively the application submits the information that condition 6 envisaged, and therefore, because it's finding that there's no contamination, or in terms of the 4 trial holes that have been approached, Environment Health is satisfied with that, and therefore they're saying that effectively condition 7, which would then be the verification reporting of the original permission, isn't then required. But nevertheless, I suppose what we're saying is that condition 8 of this proposed recommendation, so condition 8 on page 253, nevertheless still secures that position whereby should something be found in future beyond what the existing report has already done, and that is the mechanism by which that should be that would then be secured.
Right.
So as I say, it's a very unusual way of dealing with it, but nevertheless, as the LPA, we have to determine the nature of the application before us if an applicant chooses to use this route.
Yeah. Okay. So the bottom line is they have actually they've met condition 6, in our opinion.
Effectively, yes.
So it's not so much losing 6, it's only 7, and we've given them an extra 8. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor George.
Thank you, Chair. If I may come back on it, the only thing that worries me about that saying losing 6, if you look, I guess there's 2 bullet points on page 242. I'm guessing that's A and B, which is referred to as 7. I think it's just come out badly there. But B, or the second bullet point, does require a detailed scheme for remedial works and measures be undertaken to avoid risk of contaminants or gases when the site is developed. And effectively, by removing that,
yes,
we are removing a protection, and that does concern me.
Right. Now, Councillor Harvey suggested and is prepared to propose a deferment along the lines of getting some clarification on this. Would you second that, or would you prefer to propose it, Councillor George? But that avenue, would that look after some of your conditions, or some of your concerns?
I'd be very, very pleased that that would happen, actually, so we can get to the bottom of this and fully understand what's going on here in a little bit more detail. So I'd certainly support Councillor Harvey's proposal on that point. Right.
If I could bring Philip back on board, please, because I want to get this the proposal for this right. This is a proposal for deferment, Philip. Now, could you run by that again, Councillor Harvey?
And I'm going to look to Councillor George to help me here.
Yeah, sure.
What are you asking for? But I'm conscious of that second bullet point that you referred to on page 242, and the clarity and the strength of that set against paragraph 8, so condition 8, but also the context he set 6 and 7 in. So for me, that's the clarity. It's 6 and 7 that we wanted the clarity on, that second bullet point, but also the context that it leaves paragraph, the condition 8 in as whether it is strong or not. That's what I took from Councillor George's concerns, but Councillor George can speak for himself.
No, you double clicked it, David.
Thank you. Yes, Chair, I think clearly that's the position. It is clarification that the investigation has been done to the appropriate standards, and clarification that there is no need for protective measures or extra while the groundworks, etc., proceed or development proceeds. Because if we don't have either of those, it's going to be difficult going forward, or dangerous going forward.
Yeah, I get you exactly. And that second bullet, if that had been included, if you like, in the new condition 8, that might have assisted in the thing going forward, because what it does, it takes away the development side, and condition 8 looks at stuff in the future. Right. So, members, and Philip, are you quite happy with that?
Yes, Chair, I've got the summary down of that point. Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. It's been moved and seconded for deferment to determine produce clarification for this committee on the impact of the removal of condition 6 and condition 7, and the omission or the fact that condition 8 does not satisfy what is to be achieved by those two, the removal of those two conditions. It's a very long-winded way of putting it, but I think that in essence is what we're voting on at the moment. If anybody's got any fine-tuning of that, I'm welcome to listen to it. But if that's the motion, I'm going to go through the roll call, and it's Councillor Robinson.
For deferment.
For deferment, Councillor Leeks.
For.
Councillor Goodison.
For.
Councillor George. For. Councillor Grant.
For.
Councillor Frankham.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor McCormick.
For.
Councillor Bound.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Tomlin.
For.
And I will add my vote to that, for. That is the end of the committee. tonight.
Sorry, Chair, do you want to confirm?
Yes, and can I have the result of that, please, Bernie?
So that's 12 for the recommendation.
Of deferment.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much, officers.
Thank you, Chair. So that application is deferred to secure further clarification that the works are done appropriately to the appropriate standard and that there is no need for the information secured by condition 7. Thank you.
Is that right?
No.
No, I think it's a bit more than that, Philip, if I may.
Yeah, if I can assist this juncture, I think it was those elements and the other part I had noted down was effectively how an explanation around how condition 8 as proposed with this report would meet the requirements of what conditions 6 and 7 had done previously.
Yes.
An explanation of why condition 6B is no longer required and clarification of the work undertaken appropriately to the relevant standard. And I think the way that we will do that, Chair, would be to effectively seek further consultation response, more detailed consultation response from environmental health colleagues to address those points.
Thank you. Yep. Okay, but we got it there in the end. It is yet to get to 10 o'clock. It's 4 minutes to. I thank you all very much for your patience tonight. I think 8 is a maximum we can ever do in these virtual meetings because this is long enough. We all know that. I try and get a break in the middle. But thank you very much, everybody. I'll be seeing some of you tomorrow evening when we've got EP8 and see how long that one goes on for. Good night. Thank you very much. Thank you, officers. Appreciate it.